The story begins in the demon castle, where our protagonist reflects that in every era, justice always prevails over evil. A knight questions whether he is the demon king, and he confirms it, sensing the weight of his destiny. He acknowledges himself as the great being who rules over all demons, the 100th demon king, Luruslia Nord. Luruslia begins to wonder when everything started. Long ago, humans viewed demons as evil. Many of his kin were slain in the name of justice, and in retaliation, the demons fought back. Eventually, both sides pointed their swords at each other, leaving no chance for negotiation and rendering the conflict meaningless. He understands that the victor of this senseless war will inevitably rule the world. However, he also knows that humans have always feared overwhelming power. He recalls a future where the strongest heroes bring about the Demon King's end. Still, he believes there is no need for concern, as both sides have reached a point where weapons are already drawn and no peaceful path remains. While the Demon King possesses absolute power, the heroes gain their strength through trials granted by gods and spirits. With both sides wielding powerful trump cards, the battle becomes intense. In the end, justice prevails, a belief passed down from generation to generation. Because of this, Luruslia is ultimately defeated by the heroes. As the sword pierces his chest, he realizes that the heroes were thoroughly prepared. Among them are a swordmaster, a saintess, and an archmage. Despite everything, the world perceives the heroes as justice and the Demon King as evil. He begins to suspect that his defeat may indeed be the right outcome and allows himself a small, resigned smile. The knight notices his quiet laughter and wonders if he is hiding something. He meets the knight's gaze and reflects on a promise he made. The daughter of a friend was celebrating her birthday the next day. He remembers telling the child, Iris, that he would visit her and how she had welcomed the news with joy. He then informs the knight that the end of demonkind is near. Tears fall as he realizes that once the Demon King is gone, the remaining demons will be hunted, and Iris will be among those lost. The knight stands silently for a moment, considering his words, and then admits it seems he is telling the truth. He responds that of course he is, and reveals that all either side has done until now is kill each other. The church may call demons servants of evil in their teachings, but at their core, humans and demons are the same. He suggests that if the knight cannot believe his words, she should see the truth for herself. In time, she may come to question the church's teachings about the necessity of killing demons. As he begins to fade away, he speaks once more, expressing a hope that, should she ever feel anything toward demonkind, she would understand. He corrects himself, saying that what he truly meant was a hope for a shared future between demons and humans. The knight watches him disappear and reaches for him, acknowledging that she understands. She places a hand on his shoulder and expresses belief in his words, promising not to discriminate against demons. He quietly thanks her and realizes that the knight is a woman. This becomes his farewell, one that leads into the depths of hell. The final sight he beholds before death is the angry expression of the saintess. He wonders why she gazes at him with such hatred, but concludes that, as someone about to vanish, he does not need to know the reason. He finds comfort in the belief that, if the knight survives, the future will be in good hands. The Demon King, defeated by the hero, disappears from the world. The story is said to end happily, but that is not the truth. A voice begins to call out his name, Luru, over and over. He slowly opens his eyes. A woman smiles at him gently and greets him upon his awakening. He noticed that the person approaching him was a human woman. As she came closer, he began to worry about what she intended to do. She gently picked him up and commented that he was a good boy. When he tried to stop her, he caught sight of his small hand. She mentioned that he must be hungry and added that his mother would soon prepare a meal. At that moment, he realized that the woman holding him was his mother and felt a warm, comforting sensation wash over him. Although he knew he needed to think, he was already beginning to lose consciousness. According to a myth passed down through the demon tribe, creatures transcend the boundaries of species through the cycle of birth and death, and are reborn into new life forms. Luruslia, now known as Luru, never imagined he would experience it firsthand. He could clearly recall the days spent with his comrades and the moment of his defeat at the hands of the heroes. This made him wonder why he had reincarnated with his memories as the former demon lord and whether it held any particular meaning. No matter how much he thought about it, in his current form, all he could do was eat and sleep. He remembered how he had once been busy with official duties and endless battles. But now, as a baby, he found himself with nothing but free time. Observing the maid nearby, he realized he needed to gather information quickly. He wanted to ask her how many years had passed since the demon lord was defeated, but quickly understood that he couldn't even speak. He wished he could gain control of his body soon. The maid, suddenly recalling a task, picked up her wand and prepared to heat some water. She began chanting, summoning the red burn to produce a small flame. Watching her, he wondered whether that was supposed to be a spell and why the grammar in the chant sounded so strange. He thought that such a basic spell shouldn't require chants or tools at all. Then it dawned on him that, since being reborn into this infant body, he hadn't used magic even once. He began to wonder just how much magical power he now possessed. He clenched his tiny fist, knowing that humans generally had far less magical power than demons and expecting very little. But to his surprise, he felt a vast and overwhelming amount of magic within him. This made him question whether not just his memories but also his magical power had carried over. The sensation was no different from what he had felt as the Demon Lord, but he found himself unable to channel magic through his body as smoothly as before. He speculated that this might be due to either his human nature or the underdeveloped state of his body. Still, he believed that with special training, he could overcome it. He soon noticed that no one was around, which gave him the opportunity to explore his power. He knew that without it, he would be destroyed again, just like in his previous life. 7 years later, he stood in the library, freely using his power. He levitated books around him without even needing to climb onto a chair. After reading them, a snap of his fingers returned the books neatly to their shelves. Though a little concerned about attracting attention, he was relieved to see he could now use magic to a decent extent. He suspected he could even perform large-scale spells, but he knew their power was enough to destroy an entire village. That was something he had no intention of testing. As he walked through the room, he reflected that aside from magic, he had learned a few other things. From the day of his defeat, he had discovered that several thousand years had passed, which explained why everything now felt unfamiliar. Suddenly, someone called out to him. His mother had found him and noted his whereabouts. She noticed the book he was reading and asked if he was reading myths about the ancient demons again. He confirmed that he was, and explained that he found them fascinating. The ancient demons, once at war with humans, were now considered mythical beings, their existence questioned by many. His mother gently patted his head and asked whether he genuinely loved reading or if it was simply the natural fascination of childhood. He smiled softly, knowing that no one believed in the ancient demons anymore. Still, he was convinced that some of them might have survived. Demons lived much longer than humans, and even if only a few remained, he believed he could find them. Though for now, being just 7 years old, he was confined to the village and could do little more than read. His mother then recalled something and mentioned that his father, Patrick, would be returning home soon. In a letter, Patrick had said it would be about 2 weeks, and she hoped he would bring more books back with him. Patrick Caddis Nora, a sword instructor for the Kingdom of Leonard's Knights and the Lord of Caddis Village, was someone Luru longed to see again. He hoped he might resume swordsmanship training with him. But then, his mother paused again, remembering something else she had come to say. She asked whether he had plans to meet Rusty and the others that day. He realized he had lost track of time and confirmed it. His mother then urged him to hurry up and get ready or else he would be late. He agreed and soon found himself at the meeting spot, arriving just a little behind schedule. At that moment, someone called out and waved to him. It was Rusty, accompanied by 2 girls who pointed out that he was late. Rusty remarked that Luru had finally arrived and questioned whether they hadn't agreed to meet at that very spot. Luru apologized and explained that he had been delayed while reading a book. Rusty asked if reading was really that enjoyable, then added that, in his opinion, if someone was a boy, their interests should revolve around adventure. He then proudly declared that he intended to become an adventurer someday. Luru simply looked at him in silence. Me chimed in, teasing that Rusty was always talking about adventure, yet he hadn't even passed Patrick's swordsmanship test. With a smirk, she asked when exactly they could expect to leave the village. Rusty, irritated, told me she was being too harsh. Yuri gently stepped in and told me that her words had been too much, pointing out that dreaming about something was important. The 3 children had been Luru's closest companions since his reincarnation. He knew that both me and Yuri harbored feelings for Rusty, which was likely why they didn't want him to leave the village. However, he also understood that it was another matter entirely whether Rusty was aware of their feelings. Luru then changed the subject by asking Rusty if he hadn't made a promise that day. He reminded him that something was supposed to happen, and noted that Rusty had seemed excited about it. Rusty's eyes lit up as he confirmed that Luru was right. Today was the day they had been waiting for. With enthusiasm, he declared that real adventurers were coming. Yuri pointed out that adventurers occasionally passed through the village, but asked whether those were just guards for merchants. Rusty excitedly denied it, insisting that this time it was different. A top-class adventurer, one who blazed trails into uncharted lands and would one day become a legend, was expected to arrive. He urged them all to head to the village entrance to meet the newcomer. Although hesitant at first, they all knew that once Rusty got an idea in his head, there was no stopping him. Shortly after, the group reached the village entrance and saw a crowd already forming. However, they were met with disappointment when they found no adventurer in sight. Luru told Rusty that it seemed the guest hadn't arrived yet, which left Rusty looking deflated. But in the next moment, Rusty brightened again, wondering aloud whether the adventurer might be arriving soon. He darted to the front, shouting excitedly that he would go check. As the 2 girls chased after Rusty, Luru smiled quietly to himself. He knew that being an adventurer meant exploring lands and slaying monsters. In the past, such a profession hadn't been necessary, but it now seemed that once managed lands had returned to an untamed state. He couldn't help but wonder whether that was merely the result of time's passage. Suddenly, a panicked scream cut through the air. A massive monster was charging toward the village and directly toward Rusty, who was in the lead. Luru instantly released his power, recognizing it as a monster from the forest. But before he could act further, he felt another powerful force at work. An elf appeared and used wind-based whirlwind magic to halt the monster's advance. At that moment, a figure leapt onto the monster's back. With remarkable ease, the man decapitated the beast with a single swing of his sword. Luru stood stunned by what he had just witnessed. As the monster vanished, the man, clearly the adventurer, looked at Rusty, referred to him as a boy, and asked whether he was injured. Rusty, who had fallen to the ground in fear, quickly stood up and shouted with excitement, overwhelmed by what he had just seen. Mii reminded Rusty that he needed to say thank you, and Rusty, stammering slightly, managed to express his gratitude to the adventurer. A woman welcomed them warmly and said she was glad everyone was safe. Luru noticed her presence, but before he could ask anything, Rusty interrupted, wondering aloud if the woman was a spirit, complimenting her magic and pointing out her pointed ears. The woman replied that he was close, but not quite right. She explained that she was an elf, a race created after the spirits, and introduced herself as Yumi's. The adventurer then introduced himself as Gran, stating that he and Yumi's traveled together as partners. Luru sensed a powerful magical presence from both of them, something he had never encountered in their village. It made him think that Yumis and Gran were truly capable individuals. Yumis remarked that many village children dreamed of becoming adventurers, then asked Rusty if they all shared that dream. Rusty, stumbling over his words, excitedly admitted that he wanted to become a real adventurer one day as well, which made both adventurers laugh. Gran affectionately patted Rusty on the head and told him that while he wouldn't say the dream was impossible, if Rusty was serious about pursuing it, he would need to train hard. Without proper skills, the path of an adventurer would be a fatal one. Rusty responded with energetic enthusiasm, prompting another laugh from Gran, who said it was a good answer and that Rusty had potential. Gran added that he would share some adventure stories with them, but first asked if Rusty could guide him to the village inn. Rusty eagerly agreed. Watching the exchange, Mii turned to Yuri and mentioned that she didn't want Gran to get Rusty too fired up. Yuri, amused, questioned whether boys ever really change, no matter how old they get. Yumis, having overheard the girls, leaned toward Luru and asked if things were complicated between them. He replied that it was a typical love triangle. Yumis then teasingly asked what his situation was, whether he wasn't making it a love square. He simply responded that he was just an observer. She whispered that he seemed quite unusual, and asked if she was right in thinking that the two girls were cuter than average, suggesting that staking his claim now wouldn't be a bad idea. He thought her advice was highly inappropriate for a child and replied that he found it more enjoyable just to watch. Yumis, disappointed by his answer, said she was taking back her comment because his taste was terrible. He responded that her words were harsh and offered to guide her to the inn as well, suggesting she might be tired. She accepted the offer, saying that would be nice. As they walked, she mentioned with some exhaustion that they had also been attacked by a monster on their way to the village. Later that evening at the inn, the adults were served alcohol while the children sat nearby, sipping juice next to their parents. Gran began recounting their usual routine of stopping by the nearby ruins, but noted that this time Yumis had taken a particular interest in them. Yumis, slamming her beer on the table, retorted that if Gran was going to bring that up, he was far worse, especially considering he had once declared he would join a fighting tournament. Gran looked at her in disbelief, wondering if she had not just claimed earlier that she was too tired. Luru's mother remarked that it was wonderful how kind the adventurers were, and he replied that Rusty and the others had already grown completely attached to them. One of the village men asked Yumis if the two of them had come specifically to see the ruins on the village outskirts. Yumis replied that no one really knew when or for what purpose the structure had been built. Though it appeared old and possibly unimportant, she didn't believe that was necessarily the case. In her opinion, it had likely been constructed by the ancient demons, a statement that greatly surprised Luru. Gran responded that it wouldn't be so easy to determine, and even if the ruins were found, there was no definitive way to prove they belonged to the ancient demons. Yumis, clearly frustrated, asked whether it wasn't at least romantic to imagine such a thing. Luru considered that perhaps Gran had a point. Ruins could be found anywhere, and while he could identify those tied to ancient demons at a glance, he had no way of proving it. Their existence remained a myth. Mii then asked Gran if they were always investigating ruins. Gran replied that they weren't, and explained that most of his time was spent defeating monsters. Exploring ruins and participating in tournaments were just personal hobbies. He added that they had come to the village because Yumis wanted to visit the area, though he admitted he enjoyed taking part in tournaments whenever he got the chance. Luru began to wonder if their journeys weren't driven by requests or duties but by personal curiosity. They seemed to embody the truest form of adventurers, free to pursue their interests, unbound by obligation. Watching them, he smiled, thinking their travels looked genuinely fun. Rusty suddenly declared that he truly wanted to become an adventurer. He admitted he had needed help earlier but promised to work harder to improve his sword skills. He then begged Gran to take him on as an apprentice. Gran, however, refused. Rusty, caught off guard, began to cry and asked what Gran meant by saying no. Panicked, Gran clarified that it wasn't that simple. He explained that being an adventurer wasn't all about heroic moments. It also involved a lot of mundane tasks at the beginning. More importantly, he said he didn't have the resources to take care of Rusty until he became an actual adventurer. Rusty then asked if Gran would take him as an apprentice once he did become one. Gran laughed and said that if Rusty insisted, he supposed he had no choice and would become his master when the time came. He warned Rusty, though, that he wouldn't be able to teach him very much. Despite that, Rusty was thrilled and thanked Gran enthusiastically. Luru, silently observing, noted that Rusty was surprisingly persuasive when it came to negotiation. His mother commented that while Rusty seemed happy, she wasn't sure if becoming an adventurer was really a good path. Luru reassured her. saying he believed Rusty would be fine because his father had always said Rusty showed great potential. Mi then whispered to Yuri that Rusty was sure to become an apprentice now, which only made Rusty more motivated. Yuri responded that she knew it was a good opportunity for him, but admitted she felt a little sad. Suddenly, Yumis appeared behind them, startling the two girls. They screamed in surprise, and she quickly apologized for scaring them, saying she just wanted to join in on the girls' conversation. She asked if they were having love troubles. Yuri denied it immediately, while Mi explained that Rusty could be a bit clumsy, so they were only worried about him. Yumis nodded in understanding, even though no names had been mentioned. She added that, in her opinion, Rusty would surely achieve his dream one day. When that happened, she wondered whether they would truly be able to just stay behind in the village and watch him go. Before the girls could respond, someone clapped loudly and announced that it was getting late, so the children should start heading home. Though the kids protested, they had no choice but to obey. Luru's mother turned to him and said it was time to head home. He agreed and offered a smile to Gran and Yumis, thinking how interesting they were and wishing he could have listened to more of their stories. As they walked home, his mother asked when the village had last been so lively. Luru noticed the quiet sense of loneliness that always followed the end of a cheerful gathering. No matter how many years passed, that feeling never changed. His mother then called out to him, about to ask if he would one day leave the village too, but stopped herself. She simply squeezed his hand gently and told him it was nothing. He responded with a simple acknowledgement, though he understood that his mother already knew. Someday, when he had grown up, he too would leave the village. The following day, in the forest, he trained alone with a wooden sword. He swung it repeatedly, maintaining proper form and focus. After a while, he paused and wiped away the sweat, deciding that the day's practice was finished. He knew that while his father Patrick was an elite knight, he couldn't afford to reveal his demon lord powers. If he did, others might notice something was off. As he headed home, he thought about improving a bit more before his next training session. Then he heard someone shouting in the distance. Looking ahead, he saw villagers searching around with concerned expressions, making him wonder what had happened. Just then, a woman called out to him and asked where he had been, concerned that he might have been alone. He answered that he was by himself and asked what was going on. The woman replied in a worried tone that Rusty and the others were missing. He raised his voice, asking the woman if she had truly said that Rusty and the others were missing. The woman didn't answer directly, but instead asked if he had seen them himself, explaining that she hadn't found them since that morning. She reminded him that the children hadn't wanted to leave the previous day, so she suspected they may have gone outside the village without permission. He considered the possibility, and recalling the conversation from the day before, remembered that Yumis had mentioned visiting a ruin near the village. Though he had never been there himself, he believed it was located in the opposite direction from the village. He told the woman he understood, and that he would search for them as well. She thanked him and cautioned him not to go anywhere dangerous. He replied that he would do his best, but knew in his heart that the safety of those 3 children came first. They were, after all, the first friends he had made since becoming human. Upon reaching the village entrance, he was surprised to see Yumis. She shouted for him to stay back, declaring that she was about to erect a barrier around the village. She then summoned the innocent spirits of the forest to lend her their power in exchange for her mana and began constructing a magical wall separating the village from the forest. He called out to her in alarm, telling her that Rusty and the others were currently missing. Hearing this, Yumis froze and asked what he had just said. He explained that the children were likely not in the village and that everyone believed they might have gone to the ruin. He said that if he couldn't manage alone, he would ask the adults for help. But Yumis, full of regret, told him she couldn't stop the casting now. A moment later, the Arcanum mystic wall materialized at the village's edge. He shouted at her, demanding to know why she had gone through with it. Yumis pleaded for understanding, saying her priority was protecting the people within the village. Suddenly, they heard gunfire striking the barrier. He turned toward the sound and saw a magic machina firing at them. Yumis explained that these machines had emerged from the ruin and that several had been flying toward the village, prompting her to act quickly. He recognized the threat immediately. Those machines had magical cannons for legs and were designed as demon-made weapons to exterminate humans. He was grateful for Yumis's barrier, which had ensured the village's safety. Still, he couldn't help but worry. What if the machines moved on to nearby villages or cities? He asked Yumis if she didn't find the situation odd, but she responded that the ruin itself wasn't particularly unusual. As they were preparing to head back, the wall suddenly began to collapse. Gran was still inside, fighting a massive magic machina. He quickly deduced that it was a trap set inside the ruin. If that were true, then there had to be some kind of device controlling the machines. He told Yumis that he had to go somewhere immediately, confusing her. She apologized and said she couldn't cancel the barrier no matter what. After all, he was still just a child. He placed his hand on the barrier, and Yumis informed him that only the caster could grant someone permission to pass through. She urged him to go home. Instead, he broke through the barrier with his power. His hand pierced straight through the wall. Yumis stared in disbelief, asking how it was possible when she hadn't given him access. He apologized and explained that he had rewritten the magic equation, which now placed the barrier under his control as well. She asked what he meant by rewriting the magic equation and insisted it wasn't possible. But he simply stepped through, leaving her behind. He told her that he had increased the barrier's output slightly using her own mana and added that she shouldn't be able to leave either. He had applied the same restrictions on who could pass, so if Rusty and the others returned, she would be the one to protect them. As he turned to leave, he told her he was counting on her and that he was going to find the missing children. He ran off, ignoring Yumi's as she shouted after him. Left alone, she stood there stunned, wondering what had just happened, and whether that boy was truly a child. Meanwhile, inside the ruin, Gran was shielding the children. He had noticed that despite being active, the enemy machines hadn't attacked. He shouted to the frightened children that the machina might only react to moving targets, instructing them to stay still until he gave a signal. But he knew that in the current situation, there was little he could do. A familiar voice called out to him from behind, startling him. Turning, Gran was shocked to see him standing there. Gran immediately asked what he was doing there and what had happened with Yumi's. He replied that Yumis was currently casting a barrier around the village. Gran cursed under his breath, panic rising, then pointed toward the children and told him that since he was already there, he had no choice but to hide with them. He was relieved to see that everyone looked unharmed. Then he turned his attention to the machina, Rupes Gigantes, a titan originally constructed for civil labor but occasionally repurposed for combat in emergencies. He realized that he was likely the only one capable of stopping it now. He also recalled the flying machina, the cannon abyss, which had dangerously precise targeting. These titans probably shared the same design and purpose. He stepped forward, wondering whether they would attack from a certain distance. Gran shouted at him to stop and not to approach. Still, he kept walking, prompting Gran to plead with him to listen. Rusty also called out, begging him to stop. He reassured them that he was fine and told Gran that he was counting on him. He took a few steps closer to the titan. The machine reacted to his movement, confirming his suspicion. As he stepped back, the machina returned to stillness. He told Gran that the spot where he now stood marked the range limit. As long as they didn't get too close to the ruin, the titans wouldn't attack. Gran observed that the titans seemed to be guarding the ruin and asked why that would be. He agreed and said he also wondered why they had been programmed that way. Since he had no memory of the ruin, he assumed it must have been built after his death. He told Gran that he was going inside to investigate something. Gran strongly objected, declaring that he wouldn't allow it and that he refused to let him risk his life. He added that the incident was their fault to begin with, and insisted he should stay back. After all, he was still only a child and lacked the strength to fight. He looked at Gran and asked if what he was really saying was that it would be acceptable only if he had the strength to handle it. He turned to Gran and asked whether someone truly capable could enter the ruins. Gran replied that, to put it simply, yes. Without hesitation, he rushed toward the titans and told Gran to watch closely. Gran was confused and tried to stop him, but it was already too late. He had sprinted closer to the titan guards. As he crossed the threshold near to the ruins, one of the titans activated and raised its weapon to strike, but he leaped high into the air. While airborne, he smiled at the massive machine and delivered a powerful punch to its body, shattering it into pieces. Gran and the others, including his childhood friends, were left speechless by the sight. As he landed, more titans charged in from all directions. One launched a massive spear toward him, but he calmly extended his hand and caught it with ease. With one motion, he seized the spear and counterattacked, obliterating the remaining titans and bringing them down effortlessly. Gran stood stunned and asked what exactly was going on with him. He simply responded by asking Gran if his skills were now considered sufficient. Gran, still in disbelief, admitted that after witnessing that, he had no words to argue. However, he insisted on setting a condition. When asked what the condition was, Gran explained that either he or Yumi's should accompany him, as the ruin was a significant discovery, and having only a child enter could lead to complications later. Gran then said he would return to the village to escort the children back, and that if the magical machinery had been deactivated, he should not explore the ruin further. Instead, he should either return to the village or wait until Gran came back. He accepted the terms. Before Gran and the others left, he told his childhood friends to take care on their way back. Rusty replied with a nod, admitting that he understood. They simply couldn't keep up with him. Mi acknowledged that they had caused some trouble too, while Yuri apologized and urged him to be careful. He waved them goodbye, then turned to face the entrance of the ruin, wondering if now was the right time to proceed. Inside, he walked straight toward the control monitor and deactivated the magical machinery. He noted that no other operational systems or long-range attack units were listed, confirming his suspicion that the external machines were solely designed for defense. This led him to wonder whether the ruin had been constructed to preserve something. While scanning the terminal, he noticed a large room located at the deepest part of the ruin. A surge of curiosity urged him to go investigate immediately, but he remembered his promise to Gran and chose to wait. Moments later, he stood quietly in a corridor, trying not to dwell on his memories. Yet, they came back nonetheless. He recalled spending time in a similar structure with many of his comrades. It had once been filled with noise and laughter. Someone called out to him, breaking his thoughts. Gran had returned and apologized for being late, then asked if he was all right, as he seemed a bit down. He smiled gently and said he was fine, claiming it was just a little chilly inside the ruins. Gran agreed, pointing out that they were underground after all. He asked if the magical machinery had been fully shut down, and Gran confirmed that everything had been deactivated. When Gran asked how he had managed to stop it, he casually replied that he had touched a few things and it stopped. Gran then questioned whether he had also tampered with Yumisa's barrier, adding that she was furious. He remembered that and told Gran that it should be fine. He would simply rewrite the spell again. Gran looked at him incredulously and asked if he had any idea how difficult it was to rewrite a spell. Even a competent magician would require several minutes to do it. Gran also reminded him that Yumis was a top-tier magician, and despite her skills, she was still affected. This made him wonder aloud whether the technique of rewriting spells had been lost over time. He then told Gran that he would lift the barrier once they returned to the village. More importantly, he noted that there seemed to be a chamber deeper within the ruin, and they should investigate it. A short time later, the two of them arrived at a large door. Gran asked if this was the innermost chamber. Gran touched the door and said it didn't appear to open easily. He explained that doors in ruins like this usually open only when certain conditions were fulfilled. Perhaps something in the previous room had to be activated. He replied that going back would be troublesome, but he had already checked and found no such feature. Reaching out to the door, he speculated there might be another way. As soon as his hand made contact, the crystal embedded in the door lit up. A voice echoed from the crystal announcing that magic wave energy had been confirmed and identification had matched with the 100th king, Laruslia Nord. It then asked whether he wished to release the lock. He was surprised that it recognized him as the demon lord and gave the order to open. The system acknowledged the command and the crystal began to rotate. The door then opened. He turned to Gran and asked if they should proceed, to which Gran, stuttering, gave a hesitant yes. Upon entering, he froze in shock at the sight of a vast white room with a massive white capsule positioned at its center. He was certain it was a long-term hibernation capsule meant for the demon clan, developed in case they lost the war with the human race, an effort to preserve their future existence. Approaching with sweat on his brow, he wondered if the research had succeeded and whether someone was inside. With trembling legs, he moved closer, filled with the hope of seeing an old comrade again. When he stepped up to the capsule, he silently pleaded that someone would be inside. Peering in, he found Iris sleeping peacefully. Memories flooded back of the time he had missed celebrating her last birthday. Although he had prepared himself to die in that war, tears welled up in his eyes, grateful that after thousands of years, he would finally be reunited with Iris. Gran, shouting from behind, demanded to know what was happening and why there was a person there. He noticed that Gran hadn't recognized Iris as an ancient demon. It made sense. Demonic characteristics were largely unknown in the modern world. He explained that he wasn't sure of everything, but believed she might still be alive and suggested they open the capsule and check. Gran, scratching his head in confusion, asked how they were supposed to open it. He fell silent, thinking that if the system still worked the same way as before, he might be able to activate it. He reached out and touched the capsule with his power. A system voice asked if the hibernation device should be stopped. He confirmed and added an order to prioritize the life of the person inside. The system acknowledged the command and began disconnecting the wires around the capsule. As the glass covering slid aside, they noticed her breathing. Gran pointed out that she seemed to be alive. He waited happily, memories surfacing of his comrade Bacchus proudly saying his daughter would be born in a month and how excited he was for the day to come. He had replied that, as a father, he couldn't really imagine it. Another memory came of Bacchus with tears in his eyes, telling Iris how wonderfully she had grown, always greeting him with a warm smile. The capsule glass slowly opened and released Iris. She gradually opened her eyes and, upon fully awakening, spotted them and immediately turned angry. Gran sensed the change in her demeanor and warned that she was dangerous. She lashed out, sending Gran crashing hard into a wall. He questioned her actions, but then was struck by the realization. At this moment, he appeared human. As she stepped out of the capsule, memories surfaced of the endless killing between humans and demons. Iris, glaring at him, identified him as a human and gathered magic in her hand and aimed it at him, telling him to die. He stood frozen, horrified. Releasing the magic, she declared to her uncle that she would definitely avenge him. However, she was shocked when she saw him gathering her power. He combined his power with hers and softly smiled at her, thinking she had improved in magic. He then remembered that, back when he was alive as the Demon King, he used to create magic spheres and juggle them while playing with the children of his brethren. Once again, he created a swarm of magic spheres and juggled them, which left Iris stunned. With tears in her eyes, she called him her uncle. He responded gently, saying that her uncle had come to visit her. Shocked and overwhelmed, she rushed to him and hugged him tightly, crying on his shoulder. He found it strange that he was now the same height as her. He glanced over at Gran to check on him and saw that he was snoring, which brought him relief. Gran had only lost consciousness. Still, he recalled that the output of the magic bullet Iris had used earlier was nearly equivalent to that of a trained soldier, even though her magic wasn't fully developed at that time. She looked at him, eyes full of tears and with a runny nose, prompting him to turn around laughing. She shouted that he was horrible and that she had been preparing to avenge him all this time. But then, she paused and stared at him. She began asking why he spoke differently, what was going on with his body, whether he was hiding himself after the battle with the heroes, what day it was, and what was happening now. He told her she was asking too many questions at once and said he would explain everything slowly. She apologized and asked if the one who had been thrown away earlier was all right. He replied that yes, if she meant Gran, he was still alive. She asked if Gran was someone he knew and wondered what she should do. He confirmed that Gran was an acquaintance and told her that she should apologize to him later. He then explained that he had only recently met Gran but found him to be a kind person. He suggested that if they claimed the attack was an unforeseen accident, it would be fine, which impressed her. She told him he was really smart. He turned around, remarking that it would be awkward if Gran woke up now, and then sat down. He invited her to sit as well, saying they should talk for a while before Gran regained consciousness, because he had so many things he wanted to ask. She gladly agreed. Once they were both seated, he asked if it would be hard for her to believe that he was the Demon King from her current perspective. She replied that it wasn't hard at all. Her uncle was her uncle, and she had no doubts. He was surprised by her certainty and asked how she could be so sure. She responded that it was because he had juggled the magic bullets earlier, and among the demon kind, he was the only one capable of controlling that many. He questioned whether her father Bacchus could do it as well, but she shook her head and reminded him that her father was never good at controlling mana, which he acknowledged. She added that her grandfather, Mythos, could also manage it, but he had no interest in anything other than his research. Her elder sister, Rome, was also a bit clumsy. He smiled upon hearing her stories and found himself tearing up. He thought that although these were mundane memories, they had always been like that. In that moment, he realized he cared about his brethren more deeply than he had thought. She apologized, worried that it was a painful memory, but he assured her it wasn't. Instead, he felt happy just listening to her and admitted that, at the very least, he felt relieved. She looked at him with concern and reminded him that his body was definitely human and his age appeared young. She asked again what was actually happening. He hesitated, unsure how to explain it. As far as he knew, Iris wasn't the kind of demon who discriminated against humans, but her expression earlier had been different. He suspected she might be struggling to accept the reality. Clenching his hand tightly, he told her that he was actually reincarnated. Iris was confused and asked what he meant by reincarnated. She also asked if he was essentially saying that after his death, he had been reincarnated into a human body following a long period of time. He confirmed that she was right and told her that the current version of himself had a human father and mother, both gentle and kind individuals. She became quiet for a moment, then said that hearing those words made her feel somewhat relieved. Knowing that he was already satisfied with his daily life as a human, she felt there was no longer a reason for her to see humanity as the enemy. She admitted that she used to devote herself entirely to avenging him and that things had become quite violent, which left him stunned like a stone. Panicking at his reaction, she quickly tried to explain that it wasn't what she meant. Even if it had been violent, she insisted she hadn't done anything truly horrible. For example, she mentioned gathering a group of demons and attacking the human army, or occasionally leaving notes under soldiers' pillows with threatening messages, telling them they could be killed at any time, so they should always be prepared. She then swore that their actions never went beyond that level. However, he already considered it extreme and asked if that meant the demon kind had not been annihilated, given they were still capable of causing such trouble. He pointed out that it wouldn't be surprising if humanity launched a campaign to hunt demons down. She admitted that, just as he said, there had been such a campaign in the past, and they would certainly have been eradicated. He asked in disbelief if the campaign had really stopped, knowing that humanity had once unified out of hatred for demons. He couldn't understand why they would suddenly abandon it. She explained that it wasn't so much that it had stopped, but rather that it couldn't continue. Humanity had become divided into two major factions, one under the banner of the church, and the other under the banner of the hero who had defeated him. He was stunned upon hearing this, and couldn't believe that the knight had truly kept the promise she once made. Iris remarked on the irony, pointing out that the very people who had killed the Demon King were now protecting his subjects. He then asked what had happened to humanity after that, but she replied that she didn't know. She explained that during one of her guerrilla operations, she had been captured, and by the time she regained consciousness, she was already placed in the deep sleep divide. Curious, he asked what kind of person could capture a demon without sustaining any damage. She replied that it seemed the person had used a magical device that blocked cognitive senses, and based on the scent and silhouette, she believed it was a woman. She then told him that she didn't know the reason behind the woman's actions, but looking back, she was genuinely grateful, because it was thanks to that moment that she was able to meet him again. He sadly called her name, and she tightly grabbed his clothes. She then told him that during the time they had spent together, she had been truly happy. Even though he had been busy with his work, he always made time to play with her and celebrated her birthday every year. When she had heard the news of his death that day, she thought she would never be able to talk to him again like that. She felt as though it had all been a dream and begged him not to force himself like that again. He apologized to her while gently patting her head, assuring her that he was human now and such a thing wouldn't happen again. She told him that she would be happy if things stayed like this and asked how she should stay by his side now that he was human and whether the other demons knew about it. He told her sadly to listen carefully. The era where demon kind existed was already over, and it had been more than a millennium. This meant everything had changed. She asked him, her voice heavy with sadness, if he was saying that demon kind had already been annihilated. He responded that he thought some might still be alive, but demon kind was now considered ancient, and they were regarded as legends. She said that she had thought she had already prepared herself for this, but now, having been separated from those close to her so suddenly, she was starting to get used to the feeling. He looked at her with sadness, knowing that after his death, Iris must have been around 10 years old, and he guessed she must have seen her friends get killed. Clenching his fists tightly, he thought that if only he could have protected demonkind, this wouldn't have happened. He apologized to her, which surprised her, but she smiled softly and told him it was all right. She then stood up, telling him that he had already done his best at that time, and that if he hadn't been their king, she was sure the demons wouldn't have survived as long as they did. He was their hope and her hope, which is why it was all right now. Hearing her words surprised him. He smiled and thought to himself that Bacchus's daughter had grown splendidly. She then told him that even so, for demons to be considered legends meant that if she were ever seen, they would capture her and that it would be troublesome. He reassured her that she shouldn't worry about it because Gran, the person she had knocked away earlier, was currently adventuring with Yumi's, an ancient being. Yet even Gran hadn't realized that he had been facing a demon earlier. He knew that this was not a topic known to the general public. So in order for them to leave together, he had somehow persuaded his mother. Gran then woke up, feeling pain in the back of his head. He saw them talking and heard Iris suggest becoming his housemaid. Gran remembered how she had attacked him earlier, and panic spread through him. He shouted, which got their attention, and asked what the meaning of this was, making Iris stare at Gran. He shouted again, telling Gran that it seemed that there had been a misunderstanding, and Iris assured him that she wouldn't attack anymore. Gran was shocked and confused at the same time. He walked closer to them, saying that he didn't understand, but confirmed that the bloodlust was gone. He then asked Iris why she attacked him. She panicked and stuttered that it was a classic case of mistaken identity. She added that it might be too late to say it, but she was truly terribly sorry for what she had done. Gran asked why she had sought vengeance at such a young age and wondered if that was why she had mastered such magical prowess. He then asked her if life had been that tough, and she nodded sadly. Gran agreed, smiling as he told her that it couldn't be helped if that was the case, so they should consider it an accident. She smiled at his words and thanked him, but Gran told her to drop the formalities, as they didn't suit him. Gran then asked if they should head back to the village and what about the girl. He replied that it was something he had wanted to discuss. He told Gran that Iris seemed to have no one and had apparently fallen into deep sleep after being caught in an enemy trap, so he was thinking she could live in the village. Gran agreed, saying it made sense because in the city, Iris would probably end up in the slums. He then suggested they head to the village for now, to which Iris excitedly replied, "Okay." A moment later they emerged from the ruin, and Gran asked if that place was a ruin of the ancient demonic race. He simply replied that he wondered about that too. Although he couldn't prove it, he was certain the place was related to them. Regardless, he was grateful for the ruin, because it was where he met Iris. He understood that the truth about ancient demons and being the demon lord were things he couldn't share with just anyone, but now he could finally speak about them to the only kin of his kind. Iris noticed him looking at her and smiled, making his heart feel warm. Gran commented that it was touching, but since Yumis wasn't with them that day, they would need to conduct a thorough investigation again sometime. He added that, having discovered such an extraordinary ruin, it looked like they were going to be busy from now on. He teasingly asked Gran if that meant he was going to become quite famous and admitted that he was envious of him. But Gran responded by asking what he was talking about when he would be busy too. This left him confused, until Iris explained that since he had explored the ruin with them, he would also be recognized for his achievements. He protested that he was just a 7-year-old kid and no one would believe it, but Gran challenged the idea, saying that everyone would believe it, especially because he would spread the word himself. This shocked him. Gran continued by saying that his mouth was lighter than feathers and that Yumis would probably blab about how he tampered with her barrier. He reminded him that they both knew what Yumis' drinking habits were like. He panicked and told Gran to wait. He thought to himself that it wasn't that he wanted to live in hiding, but he just didn't want it to be publicly known that he was the demon lord. He didn't mind being recognized for his abilities, but standing out too much and getting involved sounded like a major hassle. Gran noticed him deep in thought and reassured him that he had only been joking. He added that if he ever wanted to claim the achievements, he would help spread the word. But since he knew that wasn't what he wanted, he promised to stay quiet. He told Gran that a first-rate adventurer's jokes were also first-rate, and Gran reminded him that he had started it, making him realize that Gran's earlier comment had been a comeback to his own joke. It became clear to him that Gran had no intention of spreading anything, and from that he guessed they might actually be trustworthy enough to speak to about demonkind. He began walking, thinking that they would probably return to that place tomorrow or the day after, so he had time to consider it more. But suddenly the ruin behind them collapsed. They turned around, shocked as it crumbled into pieces. Gran panicked at the sight and he tried to comfort him, saying that these kinds of things happened. Gran responded sadly that he had gotten used to it. It happened often when he was with Yumis. They approached the wreckage, and Gran commented that in the end, all they had left from the discovery was the village's magic machine and the scattered parts of the giant constructs. Iris asked if that wasn't still better than nothing, and Gran agreed, but then he suddenly stopped talking. Iris, confused, asked why. Gran replied that Yumis was going to cry about it. A moment later, they were on their way back to the village. He began to feel a bit nervous. He knew that both the chanting and efficiency of Yumis' magic were remarkable, and he had casually rewritten her proud barrier. That led him to suspect that Yumis might still be inside the barrier. As they arrived, Gran called out to Yumis, saying they were back. But then he froze in fear at the sight before him. Yumis, still standing inside the barrier, releasing a menacing aura and staring at them with unmistakable fury. As he was about to explain, she angrily asked if he was an idiot and shouted that he had gone alone without listening to anyone. She questioned him about changing the spell formulas and demanded to know what the point of the barrier was in the first place. He turned around to look at Gran and Iris for help, but unfortunately for him, Gran shook his head and told him that once Yumi started, there was no stopping her. Iris simply smiled, feeling nostalgic watching him get scolded. Yumis then loudly asked if he was even listening and what would have happened if he had been surrounded by machines after leaving the barrier. She shouted that in such a case he couldn't have been saved and continued to scold him, making him feel dizzy until he slowly fell to the ground. Minutes later, Yumis calmed down and asked if he understood. He replied that he understood well. She told him she had made sure Rusty and the others returned home safely and confirmed that his parents didn't know about his magic. So she simply told them he was with Gran and definitely safe. She then lectured him that he would have to manage the finer details himself, to which he agreed and thanked her. She then asked if he could dissolve the barrier, explaining that she had tried many times but found it impossible. Iris calmly touched the barrier and easily shattered it into pieces, which shocked Yumis. She couldn't believe it, but Iris just smiled and asked if she was right that it was all right. He called out to Iris in concern while Yumis trembled in fear. Iris explained that Yumis had been scolding him too much, so as his subject, she just wanted to get a little revenge. He told her she should have just stopped Yumis from scolding him, but Iris replied that she understood why Yumis was angry, so she wouldn't dare interrupt. Gran then commented that a lot had happened today, and they should call it a day and regroup tomorrow. He told Yumis that he would take them back, so she should return to the inn. Yumis agreed while still staring at Iris, then pointed at both him and Iris and told them to make sure they explained everything properly tomorrow. She walked off, and Gran told him to lead the way, which he did. A moment later, they arrived at Leroux's house, where he saw his mother waiting outside. He was startled to see her standing there, staring at him with a blank expression. She asked him where he had been, and he replied that he had only gone a little way to the ruins. Suddenly, his mother slapped him. He remained calm, simply looking at her as she began crying. She approached him, knelt down, and hugged him tightly. Trembling in fear, she asked if he understood how worried she had been. He admitted that it had been his mistake, but explained that he had to go. He knew that himself. She was surprised at his sincerity and smiled, realizing it couldn't be helped. She then looked to Gran and asked if he had been helpful. Gran replied that he had definitely been helpful because the magic machine in the ruins had been about to attack the village, and if Leroux hadn't stopped it, the village would likely have been in danger. She was relieved to hear that and wondered if it was because Leroux had learned martial arts from Patrick. Gran, however, knew to stay quiet. Leroux's mother then noticed Iris and asked who she was. She asked if Iris was correct in saying she wasn't from the village. Iris gracefully greeted her and introduced herself. She explained that due to certain circumstances she had been asleep in the ruins and was saved by them. Leroux's mother stood and asked what she meant by ruins. Iris explained that she had lost someone dear to her and, in an attempt to avenge them, fell into an enemy's trap. Many years had passed since she fell asleep, meaning her parents were likely no longer alive. Leroux's mother pitied Iris and immediately hugged her, telling her that it must have been tough. She couldn't believe someone so young had no one to rely on. She then insisted that Iris should come live with them. Iris politely declined, saying she couldn't accept food and shelter on top of having her life saved. Leroux's mother assumed Iris was just being modest and told her that wasn't the case. She turned to Leroux and asked if she was right in assuming that even he wanted Iris to live with them. He was confused for a moment, then replied that it was fine. He had intended to convince his mother anyway, but somehow the situation had flipped. His mother, now excited, told Iris to become their daughter. She enthusiastically held Iris by the shoulders and shouted that she would send a letter to Patrick, confident he would agree immediately. Iris tried to calm her by addressing her as Madam, but she insisted that wasn't the right term and forced her to call her mother. Iris was surprised but followed along. Leroux's mother then lifted her up and excitedly shouted that she was adorable and was now her daughter. Iris looked to him in panic, silently asking what to do, but he just shook his head, signaling her to accept the affection. Gran asked if this wasn't a good thing, pointing out that attaining the status of a noble's daughter wasn't easy. Gran then said goodbye, saying he would return to the inn. He reminded Leroux to come after breakfast the next morning, as there was something he wanted to discuss and ask, but he should bring Iris with him. Leroux agreed. His mother told them they should go to sleep early that night, holding Iris by the hand. Gran walked away and his mother thanked him. Leroux looked at the two women and couldn't believe that his friend's daughter had become his sister, but he was glad that everyone was safe. The next morning, he and Iris arrived at the inn. He opened Gran and Yumis's room door while apologizing for being late, but was surprised to hear Yumis say they were late, her eyes fixed on him seriously. She then asked where they should begin. When they were all seated, he asked what the discussion was about. Gran began by asking, as a starter, if he was correct in assuming that he had tampered with Yumis's barrier the previous day and where he had learned such a technique. He replied that it was a very important secret to him and that he didn't mind telling them, but in exchange, they would have to swear an oath right there. Yumis responded that she understood and swore she would absolutely not tell anyone. However, when he looked at her, he saw a red line encircling her and calmly told her that she was lying. He explained that he had cast a lie detection spell in the room. She told him that she didn't feel any magical energy flow, but he simply asked if they should test it. He then asked her what her favorite food was, and she answered with meat. Next, he asked her who her best friend was, and she replied Melia. Finally, he asked her what she would want to be if she were reborn, and she said, a bird. He then told her seriously that her answers had been lies from the beginning and asked if he was correct. This left her shocked. She then confirmed that the magic had indeed been cast, but reassured him that she truly had no intention of spreading his secret. He asked if it was true that she still intended to tell at least someone, and she admitted that she did, because as adventurers, they had a duty to report significant findings to the guildmaster. He told her that he understood how she felt, but he couldn't share the truth under those circumstances. If he were to speak, it would have to be under a contract spell. Gran then told Yumis that this was the reason why he had warned her not to treat Luru as just some kid. Yumis asked if that had been Gran's impression. She explained that she hadn't spoken much with him before and only wanted to understand his character better. She apologized for attempting something like that, and he could tell she was being truthful. He asked her if she still intended to report it, and she replied that she would try to keep it hidden as much as possible. However, if the guildmaster exercised their authority, she would have no choice but to comply. She then asked if she was right in assuming that he could use contract magic, and if he could teach her, provided it was something that could be bound that way. She admitted that she hadn't intended to ask because the method of altering magic sounded too troublesome to report, but if she couldn't speak about it, then there would be no way to report it anyway. He understood what she meant and asked Gran if it was all right with him. Gran replied that from the beginning, he had no intention of telling anyone. He added that if they were to strictly follow the guild's rules, it would be one thing. But since the expedition had ended without any gain, a little omission in the report wouldn't be too bad. Hearing that, he smiled, realizing that they really were a pair of carefree folks, just as he had thought when he first met them. He then asked Iris if it was acceptable to her as well, and she replied that it was, if it pleased him. He raised his little finger in the air and said that they should form a contract. His power spread throughout the room as he told Yumis and Gran that he would now disclose secrets about himself and Iris, and that no disclosure would be permitted. He released magical chains that wrapped simultaneously around Yumis and Gran, binding their mouths, necks, and bodies. The chains then vanished, and he declared that with that, the contract had been made. He then calmly told them that he didn't expect them to believe him, but admitted that he and Iris were ancient demons. This revelation left Yumis stunned and Gran surprised. Yumis asked what kind of nonsense he was saying, then paused and questioned whether that was even the right thing to say. He replied that he didn't really know what a typical reaction would be, but judging by their expressions, it seemed they had become like figures out of legend, just like those described in old books. Suddenly, Yumis stood up and, almost shouting, asked if it wasn't obvious. She exclaimed that she had been researching the topic herself, but ancient demons were thought to be part of a world filled with lies, exaggerated myths, and delusions. She then demanded to know how he could prove it. He replied that it was troublesome to explain, but told her that being able to alter magic spells was proof enough. He asked her if he was right in saying that it wasn't something easily done. Left speechless, Yumi sat back down defeated, realizing it was far more difficult than she had imagined. Gran commented that while he had suspected Luru wasn't ordinary, hearing that he was an ancient demon was something else entirely. Gran reminded him that his parents were nobles of the country, so surely their lineage would be documented in the family tree. Yet, here he was, claiming to be from the ancient demon race. He acknowledged that it was a valid question, but reincarnation was a concept unique to demons, and he wasn't sure how best to explain it. He then remembered something and referred back to the question he had asked earlier: what they would want to be if they were reborn. Yumis responded that she remembered and confirmed. He then asked if she understood the concept of rebirth, to which she proudly replied that she did and described it as romantic, saying the soul circulates. He wasn't sure what she meant exactly, but he could tell she seemed to grasp the basic idea. Still, he wondered how a concept unique to demons had become known to humans, especially since demons had been defeated long ago in war. He then said that if she understood, it would make explaining easier. He told them that he was not currently an ancient demon, but had been reborn from one into a human. That was why his body, and even his parents, were human. Both Gran and Yumis were shocked, realizing that rebirth truly existed. He admitted that he had died in his past life for a reason, and that he and Iris had known each other, but their meeting again in the ruins had been purely by chance. Gran asked Iris if the explanation she had given him in the ruins about avenging an enemy had been a lie. She replied that it was not a lie at all, because she truly had lost someone important to her, and that person was Luru. Gran looked at Iris in confusion, so she elaborated. She explained that Luru had been a friend of her father's and took great care of her whenever he had spare time. Despite being young, she understood how deeply she admired him. However, that was an era of war, and no one could escape the conflict. She added that Luru had always been at the center of the battlefield, and they, his subjects, had not even been able to be by his side at the end. Because of that, she had chosen to seek revenge against the world that had taken him from her. However, she was captured in the process and ended up trapped in the device found in the ruins. After awakening, everything happened as Gran had witnessed. Gran apologized for doubting her, but she disagreed, admitting that while the explanation she gave in the ruins wasn't a lie, it hadn't been entirely accurate either. She told Gran that she appreciated his forgiveness. At that moment, Yumis raised her voice and asked if she could speak. She said that accepting the two of them as ancient demons was fine, but what troubled her was the earlier mention of subjects and titles. It sounded as though Iris had been serving Luru, and if they were talking about an ancient demon serving another ancient demon, then… Before she could finish her sentence, he interrupted her and confirmed that she was right. He admitted that he had once commanded all demons, and that in his past life, he was the 100th Demon King. Yumis couldn't believe what she had just heard. That he was a Demon King. He awkwardly told them that it wasn't something that could really be proven, and more importantly, the fact that he and Iris were ancient demons was the real takeaway. His identity as the Demon King didn't hold any special significance anymore. However, Yumis stood up again and asked him what he was even talking about, shouting that it was actually a very important matter. She then turned to Iris, asking if it was true that Luru had been the Demon King. Iris replied that it was indeed true. With pride, she explained that Luru's power had been immense, to the point that during a battle, he had managed to blow a hole in a distant mountain. Yumis, shocked even more, asked how something like that had happened. Iris began to explain that she recalled a swordsman of the human race entering demon territory, but before she could say more, Gran interjected, suggesting they set aside that particular swordsman for now. Gran then admitted that he was surprised to learn Luru had been the Demon King and asked why he was telling them now and what it really meant. He replied that the story wasn't complicated, he simply wanted to be open with them and get along. He explained that although he was indeed the reincarnation of the Demon King, his current social position was that of a 7-year-old child. That meant he couldn't act freely. Besides, he had grown fond of life in the village and intended to stay a while, gathering information about the outside world. Gran asked if that meant he was seeking contact with the outside and whether he was asking them to be that bridge. He replied that rather than a connection, he hoped they would occasionally return to the village as they had this time. That might also help him find future companions. Gran shyly noted that Luru had high expectations of them and admitted they weren't exactly overflowing with knowledge. Luru smiled and replied that was perfectly fine. More than anything, he just wanted someone to talk to from time to time. He asked if that was too much, which surprised Gran, who replied that it wasn't, not at all, but that Luru was unexpectedly straightforward about it. Gran added that if that was all, he didn't mind, though it was just something he wanted to say. Gran then explained that as adventurers, they couldn't visit often without some kind of reward, so he suggested adding one condition. Luru asked what that condition was, but Gran turned it around and asked him to join their clan. Iris, confused, asked what a clan was. Gran explained that it was a mutual aid organization for adventurers, consisting of multiple parties united as a group. Unlike joining a party, there was no strict command from a leader. He added that it involved teaching inexperienced adventurers skills and knowledge while helping each other out, which was why the concept had been growing in popularity. Luru asked Gran if he was right in thinking that adventurer registration wasn't allowed until the age of 14. Gran confirmed this and clarified that he meant for when Luru turned 14. He also mentioned that neither he nor Yumis were part of any clan yet. Luru then asked which clan Gran was talking about. Gran simply replied that they would form one by the time Luru turned 14. This surprised Yumis as well. Gran then asked Luru what he thought. Luru was surprised that Gran would go through the trouble of forming a new clan, and noticed that Gran didn't seem to have any intention of using him for the clan's benefit. He understood that learning from Gran and the others would actually be a great opportunity for him. Reaching for Gran's hand, he agreed. Gran shook his hand while Luru swore that once he turned 14 and registered as an adventurer, he would join the clan they created. That became the condition for the two of them to continue visiting. Later, Gran waved goodbye and assured Luru that they would make an incredibly famous clan, so he should look forward to it. Yumis added that she planned to return before then. They watched them walk away. Iris then excitedly told Luru that 7 years from now, she would be an adventurer. He agreed and called out to her seriously, which surprised her. He told her that he wanted to find out why he had been reincarnated as a human and what had happened to the world after he had been defeated by the hero. He wanted to uncover the truth. He then asked if she would come with him. She was stunned, seeing her old uncle before her again, and replied that it would be an honor. She promised to accompany him wherever he went. He then said that before that, he would need to convince his mother and others first. She responded that if he asked honestly, it didn't seem like there would be any problem. He agreed, knowing that there were signs they had noticed him sneaking out of the village, but he still wondered what exactly they would say. At that moment, his mother appeared, calling them to say that the sweets were ready. A moment later, they were back home, eating cake, when his mother asked if she was right in thinking he planned to leave the village. She said it was understandable. He choked on his food in shock and asked how she knew. She softly told him that she had always sensed he was searching for something not found there, and that she was actually happy he was waiting until he turned 14. That made him wonder if he really had that kind of expression on his face whenever he was lost in thought, thinking about a past he could never return to. His mother said she was fine with it, but she wasn't sure about his father. Iris asked worriedly if their father was the kind of person who would object. Luru assured her that he wasn't like that. Their father was calm, but there was a quiet strength about him. He was strict when it came to swordsmanship, which made Iris realize that gaining Patrick's approval wouldn't be easy. His mother then asked if he would fight with a sword to convince Patrick if it came down to it. He asked in return if he would really have to defeat his father with a sword, admitting that it would be difficult because he wasn't particularly good with it yet. That meant he would need to practice. Iris looked at him and thought that, in moments like this, he really seemed like an ordinary child. She couldn't help but worry, wondering if he had truly been born and raised in that household without knowing that he still carried with him the regrets of his past. A moment later, they were in the kitchen when Iris asked their mother if she did all the cooking. She replied that yes, it was by her own request, and even the servants enjoyed her meals too. She then handed a lunchbox to Luru, and he thanked her as always. She asked if she was right in assuming he would be playing with Rusty and the others again today, and suggested he introduce Iris to them. He replied that he would, making her respond excitedly that it was what she thought. She then handed another lunchbox to Iris, which confused her. Iris offered to at least help wash the dishes, but their mother simply pushed her away with a smile and told her it was fine, urging them to have fun. Iris stared quietly at the lunchbox in her hands. A moment later, when they were outside, Luru introduced Iris to his friends and told them that Iris was now part of their family. He then explained to Iris that the 3 kids were his childhood friends, introducing each of them to her. Iris realized just how well he had blended in with the human world. Rusty approached her, blushing and nervously reaching for her hand to greet her. She was surprised, but suddenly remembered a mother from her past yelling at her child to stay away, warning that touching a demon would bring a curse and to run at the sight of silver hair and red eyes. But Luru had told her that thousands of years had passed and things had changed. She smiled, realizing he was right. This was a completely different era. Time had the power to transform even deep-rooted prejudice. She accepted Rusty's hand and shook it, but was confused when she noticed Yuri and me glaring. She wondered if they still harbored hostility toward demons, but then reminded herself that in this era, demon traits were not widely known. And besides, she wasn't the one standing out at that moment. Luru interrupted her thoughts by asking Rusty if it was true they were going to practice swordsmanship. Iris was confused while the 2 girls looked annoyed. Rusty awkwardly walked away and shouted for everyone to get going. Iris turned to Me and Yuri, asking if Rusty had done something wrong and pointing out that the 2 of them seemed to be glaring at him. Me and Yuri exchanged looks in silence. Then Me asked Yuri if perhaps Iris was just a little oblivious. Yuri replied that Iris didn't seem to notice that Rusty had been blushing. Me explained that Rusty had blushed that much because Iris was cute and his face had gone completely red. Yuri then worriedly asked what would happen if Rusty truly fell in love at that rate, and apologized to Iris, asking her to leave Rusty alone if she wasn't truly interested in him. Iris was surprised but then smiled as she began to understand what was happening. Me scolded her, saying it wasn't something to laugh about. Iris immediately apologized, explaining that she hadn't meant to make fun of Rusty. She had just realized that maybe she had been a bit oblivious. Yuri asked if she had really said oblivious, and Iris nodded. She then explained that she was sorry for Rusty, but she had already given her heart to someone. Me and Yuri became intrigued and told her they would be happy if she shared who it was. Iris replied that he was a bit older than her, which made the girls feel relieved. Rusty was out of the picture. Yuri then asked how much older he was. Iris thought for a moment and replied that it probably wasn't just 10 or 20 years. But at this point, she wasn't even sure how to calculate it. Both girls were shocked, then blushed, realizing that Iris was talking about an adult. They commented that she was so mature for her age. Me and Yuri then looked around, trying to figure out who the older man could be. Realizing it could only be either Gran or Patrick, they grabbed her hands and told her that it would be a tough love, but they would support her. Iris was confused, but had no choice but to go along with it. She realized she had accidentally given a vague answer without thinking. She then remembered that long ago she had conversations like this with her old friends. At that time she didn't know if what she felt was affection or something deeper, but before she could find out, Luru was killed. Now she would never be able to meet her former friends or family again. She snapped out of her thoughts when someone called her. Yuri asked if something was wrong because she had been spacing out, and Me shouted for her to come with them. She was briefly speechless, then smiled and agreed. She thought to herself that these girls were her very first human friends. And more than anything, having Luru, the most important person in her life, nearby meant that she hadn't lost everything. She made a silent promise that this time, she would do everything she could so she would have no regrets. Minutes later, while Luru and Rusty trained in swordsmanship, the 3 girls sat nearby watching. Yuri commented that she had been so surprised by Luru the other day. Iris asked what she meant, and Yuri realized Iris hadn't seen it. Yuri explained that she had heard about how Iris was saved from the ruins. Me added that the giants from the week before had been taken down by Luru, which Yuri confirmed. Me guessed that Luru must be strong because he was Patrick's son. Yuri replied that might be part of it, but she thought it was also because Luru had been working hard on his own. She mentioned that she had heard Luru had been taking lunchboxes and training hard every morning, which gave Iris an idea. The next day in their kitchen, Iris approached their mother, who was about to begin cooking. She asked what it was. Iris hesitated for a second, feeling shy, but managed to tell her that she had a favor to ask. Her mother, Media, then excitedly asked what her favor could be and happily told her that a request from her daughter was like a dream come true for a mother. But then, Iris stammered and told Media that it wasn't quite like that, asking if it was still okay for her to be her daughter, even though it was a bit late to ask. Media bent down to meet her at eye level, gently asking if she had been worrying about something like that and if she was right in thinking Iris had lost her parents. Media then hugged her and explained that, before she realized it, so much time had passed. And when she saw Iris like that, she truly, from the bottom of her heart, wanted to make her her daughter. This surprised Iris, as she hadn't imagined Media would feel so strongly about her, especially since she hadn't even been able to tell her everything yet. Media added that she believed everyone needed someone to support them, and a place they could always return to, no matter what happened. She swore to Iris that she truly wanted to give her that kind of place. She thought it might have something to do with Luru. Iris asked if that was the reason behind her feelings, and Media replied that it seemed like Iris cared about Luru. Perhaps because, after waking up in the ruins, the first person she saw was Luru. She had noticed Iris seemed to have special feelings for him, or at least that's what she thought. Iris then reminded Media that she wasn't officially adopted, prompting Media to ask if she expected her to treat her like a servant. Iris replied yes, but Media softly patted her head, telling her that together with Luru, she wanted to become a place where they both could belong. She thought it would be good to have a family. Iris was stunned by those words, and remembered that her family, before she had even realized it, had already become something distant, a thing of the past. And now, Luru and his parents were slowly becoming something she revered. Iris wanted to live her life embracing that thought. Media was then surprised to see her cry from the painful memories and quickly apologized for making her cry. She then reminded Iris that she still hadn't told her the favor yet, and Iris finally replied that she was hoping Media could teach her how to cook. This confused Media for a moment. Iris then explained that a long time ago, Media had taught her a little, but she thought that maybe her dear older brother had grown used to the flavors of the food Media made now. That was why she wanted to learn to make it herself. For Luru, Media, seeing her shyness, became excited and immediately agreed. She then informed Iris that according to the kingdom's law, as long as they weren't blood-related, even siblings could get married, causing Iris to feel even more embarrassed. Still, Media agreed with her that it was important to win Luru's stomach while she had the chance, and was eager to teach her the dishes she used to win over her husband Patrick. Media then added that Luru was oddly affectionate toward Iris, and she wondered if having a little sister made him feel that way. But Iris thought it was because she was merely the daughter of a friend, though she also realized that the current situation did feel a bit advantageous. Iris then confidently told Media that she would do her best, making Media cheerfully exclaim that that was the spirit she wanted to see. Minutes later, they are in the middle of cooking when he asks Media how she met Patrick. Media responds that the first time she met him was about 15 years ago, back when she was working as a priestess. This surprises Iris, who asks for confirmation that Media had actually been a priestess. Realizing she had never mentioned it before, Media explains that she was once an itinerant priestess of the End Times religion. Despite her not holding a very high rank, the religion was still one of the major organizations at the time, and as a traveling priestess, she was welcomed in every town. She had plenty of work and was doing her best. Iris expresses how unexpected that was, considering that priestesses were once known to wield holy energy powerful enough to vanquish evil, enemies who were to be killed on sight. Yet she hadn't sensed anything like that from Media, which makes her wonder if the church had changed its ways in the modern era. Media responds with a laugh, admitting that it feels a bit embarrassing now. She recalls a time when she was traveling in a carriage along a mountain path and was attacked by monsters. Although there were guards present, the monsters were strong, and she genuinely thought she was going to die. Fortunately, Patrick arrived just in time and protected her. Afterward, he looked back to ask if she was hurt. He spoke like a gruff old man, but in that moment, something clicked for her. She believed then and there that she was going to marry that man. Iris, puzzled, wonders why she said she was going to marry him instead of simply wanting to. Media laughs again and says she just knew it would happen. She asked him where he was from, thanked him, and after they parted, she submitted a request to be transferred to a church near his place of work. Iris is surprised by how determined she had been. Media adds that if one loves someone, they need to at least do that much, and that the real challenge came afterward. At the time, Patrick, with his good looks and status as a promising young knight, was incredibly popular. There wasn't a single girl who didn't like him. Every day, women would gather outside the fortress where he worked, handing gifts to the gatekeepers in hopes of reaching him. But Patrick was still an ordinary single knight then, and he received so many gifts, such as sword belts and clothes, that they couldn't even fit in his room. It appeared he ended up giving them away to the other soldiers. That was why Media decided to give him something that wouldn't be discarded so easily. She approached a knight on guard duty and introduced herself as the woman Patrick had once helped on the mountain path. She handed over a basket, asking the guard to pass it on to Patrick if he didn't mind. When Iris asks what it was, Media confirms that it was food. Patrick ate it, and when the food container was returned, it included a letter from him. In the letter, he thanked her and asked if she would like to go somewhere together. Iris smiles softly at Media, realizing that she had truly won Patrick over through his stomach. She begins to wonder if that same approach might work for her. She asks whether Media thinks the same plan could work on Luru. Media responds that since Luru is a bit like Patrick, it should be fine. She asks Iris if it makes her want to try, and Iris, giggling slightly, admits that it does. With renewed energy, Media becomes determined to teach Iris the secret cooking techniques that Luru likes. Iris responds with anticipation, saying she's looking forward to it. Later, outside, they are seated on a mat on the ground. Beside them are sandwiches prepared by Iris. Luru takes a bite and asks if she made them. She replies that she did, though with some help from their mother. Shyly, she mentions adjusting the seasoning to resemble a dish she made recently. Luru notes that this must be why it tastes so good. He then says that if he becomes an adventurer one day, he might start gathering ingredients and try to make dishes from the demon tribes. He wonders aloud if it would be alright to ask for her help when that time comes. She immediately agrees. He then tells her that after a short break, they will resume training. She observes that he seems especially motivated today. He confirms this and explains that their father is returning tomorrow. The next day, a carriage stops in the village and someone steps out. The man removes his glasses upon seeing him and says that it has been a while. That man is his handsome father. He took Patrick's bag case and asked him if he would be able to stay for a long time. Patrick replied that he couldn't stay for too long, but mentioned that he did have time to provide some training for him and Rusty. He responded that he understood and added that he thought Rusty was really fired up this time. He asked Patrick to tell Rusty not to push himself too hard, prompting Patrick to question if something had happened. He replied that he would explain later and that a lot had happened recently. Patrick agreed and followed him, asking where Media was. He told him that Media was at home making lunch with Iris, which confused Patrick. Patrick recalled reading in a letter that Iris was going to stay with their adopted daughter and wondered why that would happen and whether he was okay with it. He replied that he didn't mind at all, as Iris was polite and a good girl. Patrick, surprised to hear such praise, teasingly asked if Iris was his girlfriend. He responded that there was no such thing as a girlfriend in this situation, especially when she was going to become his sister. He added that Patrick wouldn't know, but Iris was actually the daughter of a friend. Patrick then informed him that, according to the kingdom's law, marriage between siblings who aren't blood-related was not prohibited. He explained that in such cases the custom was to marry first and then be adopted into another house. However, he clarified that it wasn't about legal issues. Patrick asked if he was right in thinking the possibility of a relationship between Iris and him was low, and mentioned that it seemed he viewed Iris as a real sister. He agreed, stating that was exactly what he had been saying. A few minutes later, they arrived home, where Media, Iris, and the other maids welcomed Patrick back. Patrick cheerfully announced that he was finally home and remarked that things must have been quite tough for Media. She replied that she was perfectly fine. Patrick then noticed Iris and asked if she was Iris, to which she shyly confirmed. He warmly told her that he had heard about her from Media and thanked her for preparing food. He then suggested that everyone head inside and talk. In the dining area moments later, Patrick began explaining that magic tools were becoming popular in the royal capital, particularly among high-ranking nobles and officials. In short, households of important people used them often, and many were imported from outside the country. His family listened to his story and concluded that asking Gran for help had been the right decision. He knew his father's stories were always interesting, but they were often simplified for children. Moreover, since Patrick was a knight of the kingdom, the complex information was not easy to grasp. He figured he wouldn't be able to hear detailed insights. Patrick then looked at Media and opened a discussion about what was written in the letter. She responded sweetly, asking if he was referring to the idea of taking Iris as their daughter, saying it wouldn't be a bad idea since Iris was so cute. Patrick agreed immediately and remarked that, from what he had heard, Iris seemed like a good girl and appeared to be getting along well with Luru. Iris bowed and thanked him for the compliment. Patrick laughed, noting how polite she was. He then promised to submit the application forms upon returning to the royal capital, and Media thanked him warmly. Luru watched his family getting along, but then frowned, knowing he needed to speak up. He told Patrick that he had something he would like to discuss. Patrick asked what it was, and Luru confidently said that when he turned 14, he wanted to become an adventurer. Patrick replied that it was acceptable, since, as nobles, it came with complications but was still possible. He added that even if Luru became an adventurer, he could still inherit the family estate, and if necessary, they could always adopt someone. There were options. However, he warned that being an adventurer wasn't as easy as it sounded, so a challenge needed to be set. Patrick gave him a challenge. By his 14th birthday, he must be able to match Patrick's swordsmanship. Patrick, who stood at the peak of swordsmanship in the kingdom of Leonard. Luru smiled upon seeing the fire in his father's eyes. Patrick then added that if he couldn't reach that level, he would die quickly, even as an adventurer. Luru recognized that same fierce determination in his father's eyes that he had once seen in the warriors who challenged him when he was the Demon King. He responded with understanding and swore that by his 14th birthday, he would become a swordsman recognized by his father. Patrick, proud of his son's determination, told him he believed he would become strong. Media, laughing, mentioned that she would need to prepare lunch for Patrick the next day as well, to which Patrick cheerfully agreed. Iris whispered to Luru that she was glad, and he nodded in return. Looking at his hand, he knew his swordsmanship skills were still immature, his physical strength lacking, and his magical control not yet what it used to be. Still, he smiled, knowing that there were many challenges ahead. Days later, at the training ground, Rusty launched forward and swung his sword at Luru, but Luru easily blocked the strike and countered, but Rusty managed to block it. He asked Rusty if he could keep up with that speed. Rusty replied that he had improved and explained that over the past few days, Patrick had drilled him intensely. He noted that he was getting better at quick movements, though he still couldn't perform a proper counter. Luru offered to teach him and suggested they surprise Patrick the next time he visited, which excited Rusty, who readily agreed. Meanwhile, Iris sat at the side watching them. She knew that beyond his modern swordsmanship training with Rusty, Luru had also been secretly practicing magic at dawn when no one was around. She reflected that, although Luru was not as busy as when he was the Demon King, his reincarnation hadn't changed how occupied he was, but she was happy to see that he seemed much happier now. Still, she felt that while Luru was working hard, she herself wasn't doing enough, and that didn't feel right. Just then, someone called her from behind. Turning around, she saw Mi and Yuri approaching, asking her for a favor. Yuri and Mi told Iris that they wanted her to become their mentor, which took her by surprise. She replied that if it was dancing, she had some experience, though she wasn't particularly skilled in other arts. Mi quickly shouted that it wasn't about that, they meant a mentor in combat. Iris asked if it was really for them, and Yuri confirmed, apologizing for bringing it up so suddenly. Mi explained that she had tried to stop Rusty from becoming an adventurer, but Rusty refused to give up. Yuri added that, at this rate, Rusty was truly going to leave the village. That was why they had decided to become adventurers as well, and for that, they needed combat training. Yuri continued, explaining that a few days prior, they had spoken to Luru about their decision. Luru had initially been surprised that they wanted to become adventurers, but after they explained that it would be dangerous for Rusty to go alone, he came to understand that they intended to stay by Rusty's side. Yuri then said that was the reason they wanted to train, and asked whether Luru thought Patrick would help them with it. Luru had replied that Patrick would probably train them, but rather than focusing solely on swordsmanship, it might be better for them to train as mid-range support. This surprised them, prompting them to ask what he meant. He explained that mid-range support referred to those who assist from behind the front lines, using magic or tactics to back up the fighters. He added that strengthening the formation would give the frontline swordsmen more freedom, and since Rusty was likely best at close combat, their support would be crucial. Knowing Rusty well, he suggested they ask Iris for help. Yuri then turned to Iris, explaining that this was the reason they had come to her, because she was knowledgeable about magic and quite strong. Iris agreed that Luru's suggestion was excellent. She told them she didn't mind teaching them, but warned that the techniques she had learned were quite unique and the training would likely be intense. Both Yuri and Mi quickly assured her that they were completely fine with that, and even said the tougher the better, which surprised Iris. She asked them why they were willing to go so far. Mi confidently responded that it was because they wanted to stay with Rusty. She explained that whenever something caught Rusty's interest, he would just chase after it without hesitation. Iris was startled when she saw Mi's expression turn solemn as she recalled the incident with the giant in the ruins. Luru had spoken about how strong Rusty was, but at the time, they had been so scared of the giant that all they could do was hide behind Rusty. If something like that were to happen again, it would become a lasting regret. Yuri added that, as they were now, they would only be a burden. That was why they couldn't just follow Rusty around. They needed to become strong enough to protect him. Hearing this, Iris remembered the time when she wished to be stronger. She stood up, telling them that she understood their feelings, the desire to protect someone dear. In that case, she said, she had no reason to refuse. However, she warned them that since they had asked her to make the training as tough as possible, she wouldn't hold back. She asked if they were truly ready. Both Yuri and Mi were terrified by the determined red gleam in her eyes, but they stuttered through their fear and begged her to teach them. A moment later, Luru and Rusty were finishing their training for the day and walking back when Rusty commented that he thought he was starting to get the hang of it. Luru agreed but reminded him that actual combat was still a long way off. He told Rusty there was no need to rush and that they should get some rest for now. Suddenly they heard shouting nearby. Both of them froze when they saw Iris shouting at Mi and Yuri not to rest, explaining that enemies target those who are tired and that while they're slacking off, their allies could die. Luru and Rusty stood stunned in horror as they watched Mi and Yuri push themselves to their feet, trembling, while Iris continued yelling that if they truly wanted to protect what was precious to them, they had to kill the enemy before the enemy killed them. Rusty was visibly shaken by how brutal Iris was, and Luru felt the same. However, Luru understood that this was the training method passed down by that infamous lunatic from the demon army, and it explained why Iris had grown so strong in just a few years. Luru then turned to Rusty and said they should keep practicing a bit longer before heading back. Rusty agreed. Luru smiled, thinking that now was not the time to rest. 7 years would pass in the blink of an eye, and the moment of truth would come sooner than they thought. 14 years later, the day of facing his father arrives. Media and Iris were standing to the side, watching as Patrick and Luru stood face to face in the middle. Patrick told him that he had been waiting for this day. Luru responded that he had been waiting for it as well. Patrick told him that since it was their final match, they should review the rules. It was to be a contest of swordsmanship only, with no use of magic allowed. He added that although Luru had grown stronger, he was still a child, and Patrick could easily overpower him with brute strength. For that reason, Patrick was wearing a strength suppression magic tool, carefully adjusted so that their physical strength would be evenly matched. Luru acknowledged that, in other words, it would be a battle of pure skill. Patrick confirmed that was exactly the idea. Luru reminded himself that the reason he sought to master modern swordsmanship was to keep his Demon King abilities hidden, preserving them as a trump card for the future. The test would mean nothing if he didn't rely solely on swordsmanship now. Patrick remarked that Luru had become strong and that he believed he would surpass him someday. He then asked if that was Luru's goal. Luru confirmed it and added that if he did surpass him, he intended to become the next swordsmanship instructor for the Royal Knights. Patrick was surprised, having never expected to hear such words from his son. Patrick told him that if he were to take over, he wouldn't need to worry about finding a successor. However, for the time being, he wasn't ready to give up the position, not when he still had a wife to look after. Luru responded that it was serious business, but he also had a sister who stuck with him, so he couldn't afford to lose either. Patrick laughed, noting that Luru had certainly learned how to speak well, and raised his wooden sword. He asked if they should begin. Luru agreed. Even though he had grown stronger, Luru knew that his human body was still inferior to the one he once had as the Demon King. He focused on Patrick's movements, listening to his breathing and the sound of his muscles shifting, but lacked enough information to predict his father's opening move. He knew that to gauge it, he would have to initiate the attack. He dashed forward, thinking that if he committed to the first strike, Patrick would likely dodge and attempt a counter. He thrust his sword toward Patrick's side. As expected, Patrick dodged and raised his sword to swing down. Luru immediately struck at Patrick's exposed side. Patrick, surprised, managed to block the strike. He stepped back, praising Luru's technique, and asked why he hadn't fought like that before. Luru simply reminded him that he had once said it was good to have a trump card or two up one's sleeve. Luru pressed forward, swinging his sword and mentioning that he had been thinking about a lot. Patrick blocked the next strike, then loosened his grip, allowing the blade to slide downward and avoiding the full force of the blow. Luru twirled his sword around and swung again. Patrick blocked the attack and noted that the fundamentals of Luru's techniques were undeniably what he had taught him. Patrick understood that the approach he had drilled into Luru was based on cutting off the opponent's escape routes, cornering them step by step. But Luru's style felt different, more relentless. No matter how much the opponent tried to run, Luru chased them down and crushed them. It was not entirely illogical, but it didn't follow typical patterns either. It was as if Luru had real battlefield experience. Patrick asked if he was a genius, but Luru denied it. Patrick replied that his technique resembled that of a rational fighter backed by seasoned experience. He was impressed that Patrick had picked up on that after only a few exchanges. Luru knew it was true. He had years of combat experience from his former life, and had integrated the aggressive style of the Demon King into modern orthodox swordsmanship, refining it within that framework. Patrick noted that customizing a high art like traditional swordsmanship wasn't something that should come so easily, yet decided not to dwell on it further. Both of them were nearing their limits. Patrick raised his sword and began releasing a portion of his magical power, stating that they would end the match with the next move. Luru smiled, recognizing Patrick's technique. It was the very embodiment of simplicity, encapsulating everything about orthodox swordsmanship. Yet it was more refined than anything Rusty or even Luru could manage in their current states. Luru raised his own sword, confident that he had a counter prepared. Patrick dashed forward, shouting that he was coming. Luru responded with equal confidence, calling for Patrick to take it. Both launched forward at once, delivering a single decisive blade strike aimed at one another. Hours later, he woke up and saw many people drinking around him, making him wonder where he was and if the place was a tavern. Iris, sitting next to him, informed him that he was finally awake. He asked her why he was there. She replied that during his fight with Patrick earlier, he lost and passed out. That reminded him, when Patrick hit him with that single blade strike, he had lost consciousness. Still, he accepted the defeat easily and asked Iris what the celebration was for, especially if he had lost. He questioned whether this wasn't supposed to be a test that he had failed. Iris explained that it wasn't about winning or losing. After all, even Rusty and the others had been soundly defeated by Patrick, yet they had confidently set off on their journey a few months prior. The realization settled in as Iris continued, telling him that the banquet taking place was a celebration of his departure. She then pointed at Patrick, who was proudly telling stories to everyone. How Luru was such an easy birth and how those tiny hands had once grabbed his fingers so tightly, making him feel certain Luru would grow up strong. Iris mentioned that Patrick had been going on and on about his life, and was now on his third round of the same story. Luru asked how Patrick never got bored, to which Iris responded that drunk people had always been like that, regardless of the era. She recalled similar moments from her past, remembering her father drinking and chatting with the Demon King version of Luru. Hours passed, and the villagers gradually returned home, while others fell asleep from drinking too much. Meanwhile, Media approached him as Iris slept on his shoulder. Media softly told him he had worked hard up until now, and praised him for doing a great job. Noticing Iris sleeping next to him, Media asked if she was interrupting something. He replied that he was just about to wake Iris up. Iris quickly pulled away from his shoulder, flustered, but he said it was perfect timing. Media then asked Iris if they should head back to sleep, and Iris agreed, apologizing for falling asleep on her brother's shoulder. He assured her that he didn't mind at all. As he was about to tell Media he would head home shortly, Patrick walked up and sat next to him, asking if the star of the show was already planning to leave. Media told them they would head back first, and Iris gave a small bow in farewell. He nodded, telling them to take care, and watched as they exited the tavern. Patrick then asked if he was feeling better now. He replied that he was fine, though he had been hoping to earn an unquestionable victory and pass the test, which left Patrick momentarily speechless. Patrick asked why he didn't fight seriously, catching him off guard. But when Patrick saw his reaction, he laughed heartily, saying he was only joking and that there was no need to look so shocked. Luru told Patrick not to say strange things so suddenly, and Patrick, still chuckling, agreed. Then Patrick asked if he was right in thinking that Luru couldn't fight seriously because he was determined to keep certain things hidden. Luru looked at him, wondering just how much Patrick had figured out. He apologized and explained that he never intended to keep it a secret forever. He had simply thought it would be better to save it as a trump card. Patrick admitted that he had taught him the value of having a trump card, but added that he expected Leroux to go all out for the final match. Seeing Patrick's mildly frustrated reaction, Leroux smiled. It was clear Patrick had realized he was holding something back, even if he hadn't figured out that it was ancient demon powers. Given that the test had forbidden magic, Leroux truly had fought at full strength. At least full strength by human standards. If he had included his Demon King powers, it would have required the use of magic, which he had deliberately avoided. He reflected that, in doing so, he had technically misled Patrick. Still, he knew it was rare for his father to show this level of emotion. And if it was Patrick, he believed that even if he learned the truth, he wouldn't fear him, nor would he spread the information unnecessarily. He then asked Patrick if they could fight again, but this time, with everything on the line. Patrick, intrigued, asked if he really meant it. No holding back. Leroux nodded and added that if they were to fight, he wanted Patrick to go all out too. Patrick looked confused at first, but then agreed, mentioning that he hadn't held back quite as much as Leroux might have thought during their earlier match. Leroux shook his head and clarified that what he meant was for them both to use magic, and to do so without Patrick wearing the strength-suppressing magic tool. Patrick seemed irritated and asked if Leroux was mocking him. He reminded Leroux that he was one of the top swordsmen in the kingdom, and now his son wanted him to fight seriously against a 14-year-old. Leroux simply smirked, thinking that Patrick's intensity was exactly what he needed. Calmly, he told Patrick that if he didn't fight seriously, he wouldn't be able to go all out either. He added that his departure was the day after tomorrow, so if they fought early the next morning, no one would be around to witness it. Patrick looked at him for a long moment before agreeing. He warned Leroux that if they went through with it, he wouldn't hold back. And if Leroux got injured and his journey was delayed, he couldn't complain. Leroux replied that that was supposed to be his line, which surprised Patrick, then made him laugh. Patrick finally agreed, stating that, as Leroux wished, he would show him the full power of the top swordsman in the kingdom of Leonard. The next morning, before the sun rose, Leroux took out a coin. Patrick, noticing, asked what it was for. Leroux explained that it would make a good signal to start their match. He suggested that they toss the coin, and when it hit the ground, they would begin. Patrick responded that he was ready whenever Leroux was, just to throw it when he was ready. Leroux teased him for sounding confident and said he would take him up on the offer. Then, Leroux released his ancient aura, startling Patrick. Patrick admitted he didn't think Leroux was that strong. Leroux clarified that he still wasn't at full power. There were parts of his strength he couldn't fully control yet. Patrick raised his sword, saying that he didn't completely understand, but what mattered was that Leroux was serious, and it was time. Leroux agreed, placed the coin on his thumb and flicked it high into the air. The coin spun upward, then began its slow descent toward the ground. When the coin hit the ground, both he and Patrick tilted their feet and dashed toward each other, their swords colliding at the center with a sharp clash. Patrick admitted he was surprised, not having expected the gap between them to be so small. Leroux responded that he hadn't expected it either and acknowledged that he still had a long way to go. Patrick then pushed his sword away, stating that he had planned to end the match with one decisive strike. Leroux was pushed back slightly, creating a gap between them, but he immediately dashed forward again, positioning his sword for a frontal thrust. Patrick noticed his stance and recognized that a thrust was coming. He considered dodging, but quickly realized that even if he did, a follow-up attack would be waiting. He remembered that just yesterday, he could have managed it, but today he couldn't keep up with Leroux's speed. That left him with only one viable option, to knock the attack aside. Leroux in turn was surprised by Patrick's positioning. He was impressed that Patrick intended to block the attack head-on. Knowing that slowing down would give Patrick an opening to exploit, he decided to take a gamble. He committed to the thrust, but Patrick swung his sword down hard, deflecting Leroux's weapon to the side. Patrick, believing the match was over, excitedly declared victory. But then, to his shock, he saw Leroux holding a second sword, one wrapped in ancient magical power. Leroux questioned who had said it was over, then swung the blade with force, causing Patrick to collapse. With pride, he stated that it seemed he had won. Moments later, Leroux walked slowly, carrying Patrick on his back. His entire body ached. He realized that since childhood, he had gradually increased the amount of magic he could use, but Patrick had been unexpectedly strong. To keep up, he had pushed his magic several levels beyond what his body was accustomed to, and now he was paying the price in severe muscle pain. He asked himself whether he would always have to endure this kind of backlash just to expand his magical capacity. Reflecting on it, he thought about the heroes of history, humans who had overcome their own magical limits time and again to defeat the strongest demons. Their efforts, he realized, were truly extraordinary, and it made him aspire to fight at that same level someday. As he returned, Iris greeted them and asked how the fight had gone. He assumed that Iris had already sensed the magic he used, but he simply told her that he won. It hadn't been a flawless victory, he admitted, but if they fought again, he was confident he would win without a doubt. He added that Patrick had been far stronger than he had expected, which surprised Iris. She remarked that it was rare for him to openly praise someone he had fought and asked whether Patrick was truly that skilled. He confirmed that he was, and added that depending on the equipment, if Patrick had been born in that era, he might have been a match for Bacchus. That stunned Iris, as it meant Patrick was on the level of her original father. Just then, Patrick stirred and asked where he was. Leroux replied that they were back in the village. Patrick, recognizing the setting, acknowledged his loss. Patrick slowly climbed down from Luru's back, remarking that he had always believed the world was vast, but he never expected his first defeat in ages to come from his own son. As Patrick struggled to move, Luru supported him, warning him not to push too hard. It was clear Patrick had used more magic than he thought. Patrick then asked Iris if she had noticed anything. Iris replied that she had seen them leave early in the morning and had waited at the village entrance for their return. Patrick asked if she truly knew how strong Luru was, and she explained that when Luru rescued her from the ruins, she had seen a glimpse of that strength. Patrick, reassured, said that with the two of them together, he no longer worried about them becoming adventurers. But he reminded them that there would be times when strength alone wasn't enough to resolve a situation. When those moments came, they should never hesitate to rely on others. People like him, media, Gran, or anyone they could trust. He asked if they understood. Luru reflected that if strength alone could solve everything, then teaming up with a hero would have been sufficient. But the world didn't work that way. He nodded, assuring Patrick that he understood and would keep the advice in mind. Patrick smiled gently at them and turned to walk ahead, reminding them that it was time to head home and begin packing for the journey. Luru and Iris exchanged with a knowing look and smile. They then followed Patrick to head home. The next day, a carriage was waiting at the entrance to the village. The villagers had gathered to see them off, standing alongside their parents. Media, watching the moment, told them that it was finally time to set off. The villagers told them that they weren't going off to war or anything, and they were sure news about them would spread quickly. After all, they were Patrick's disciples. Media, smiling warmly, said she had never been too worried about them. But her eyes welled up with tears as she added that both of them had grown into such fine individuals. She hugged him tightly and told him not to do anything too reckless and to take good care of each other. He responded with a calm assurance, promising that they would be fine. Media then embraced Iris, telling her that if anything happened, she should feel free to come back anytime. She begged her to look after Luru for her, and Iris agreed without hesitation. Patrick, standing nearby, said he would be taking a little more time off in the village before returning to the capital and wished them a safe journey. He added that he had no real worries about them and looked forward to seeing them again in the capital. The driver approached politely and informed them that it was almost time for their departure. Luru looked at Iris, and together, they stepped into the carriage. As they took their seats, they waved to their parents and the villagers, saying their goodbyes as the carriage set off. He remarked to Iris that it was his first time being the one to see someone off, and she replied that he hadn't really had time for trips in the past either. He agreed, recalling that Bacchus was always the one traveling. He wondered aloud why it was always just Bacchus, to which Iris replied that perhaps it was because Luru was the one who didn't need to move. She then asked if they could go over the route again, and he explained that their first stop would be the capital. They would pass through a few villages on the way, and there was a larger town they'd stop in about midway. He estimated it would take about a week to reach the capital. She asked if she was right in thinking that once they arrived, they would register as adventurers. He confirmed it was the plan, though before visiting the Adventurers Guild, he thought it would be better to meet with Gran and the others first. He also noted that Rusty and the rest should already be at the clan's base, which made her even more excited. Curious, she asked if he thought the others had gotten stronger over the past few months, and mentioned that she wondered how much progress Me and Yuri had made with their magic. He replied that he was interested in checking out weapons and antiques, prompting her to ask if he was looking for anything specific. He explained that he had some research to do, and then pulled out the prototype he had been working on, asking if she recognized it. He held out a gun. At first, she identified it as a magic cannon, but upon realizing its portability, she correctly named it a Magia Vistra magic gun, a magical weapon designed for those without magical power. He told her she was right and explained that he had repurposed parts from a magical machine he had found in some ruins. Then he handed her another gun and asked if she knew about it. She studied it and asked if it was a magic gun, noting that it looked like a completed prototype, but with a different structure and material than usual. He clarified that he didn't make that one. It had been acquired by Yumis from a traveling merchant. That surprised her. She realized that meant someone else had created the weapon, even in a time when people could barely operate magic machines. He went on to explain that in the past, both humans and demons, with their overdeveloped civilizations, had escalated the horrors of war unnecessarily. That was why he believed technology should be developed for daily use rather than conflict. Yet here they were, still discovering powerful weapons even he didn't fully understand. He added that if such technology were to be monopolized by a single nation, it would be disastrous. Iris understood what he meant and concluded that was why he was researching it. He told her that many mysteries still surrounded the device and asked her to try activating it as a test. She was confused but agreed. She poured some of her magic into the gun, but it didn't activate. She reported that although she felt her magic being drained, the weapon still wouldn't work. That meant it wasn't broken, it simply wouldn't respond. Luru noted that even Iris couldn't activate it and admitted that, despite dismantling and studying it, he still didn't understand how it worked. He sighed, saying they had only just left the village and were already facing a significant challenge. Iris, laughing gently, told him that he seemed to be enjoying himself. He looked at her in confusion. She explained that he had always liked solving mysteries, reminding him of the time when Bacchus's secret alcohol stash disappeared and Luru had gleefully tracked down the culprit. Embarrassed, he admitted he couldn't believe she still remembered that. As he turned to look out the window, he asked her what Bacchus had done after he died. She said she didn't know. After he passed, she had left her father's side and traveled on her own. He said he understood, but she apologized and told him that she didn't think Bacchus had died. She explained that Bacchus was the kind of man who wouldn't die even if someone tried to kill him. He laughed, understanding what she meant, and agreed, though he knew there was no way to confirm it now. Still, he hoped that when Bacchus's final moments came, they would be peaceful. Hours later, the driver called out and asked if they were awake. He informed them that they would be stopping in the next town for the night and advised them to prepare. Luru replied that he understood. Iris, excited, pointed out the window and urged him to look. Peering outside, he saw the towering walls and spires of the fortress city of Final. Iris was amazed to see such a large town, and he told her that it was the first city of that size he had seen since reincarnating. As they approached the gate, a guard stopped them and asked for their travel pass. The driver handed it over, and after checking, the guard verified it and welcomed them to the fortress city of Final. He smiled at the guard, who responded with a thumbs up, which he returned. He then asked Iris if she was enjoying herself, and she happily responded that she was. A few minutes later, they arrived at their inn, and he was impressed to see that it was much nicer than he had expected. The driver mentioned that he had heard the food there was supposed to be excellent and said he would leave their luggage at the front. He agreed, but noted that it was still a bit early for dinner. He then asked Iris if she would like to explore until dinner time, and she said she would love to. The driver warned them that it might be dangerous to go out alone, especially as children, but he responded that they were planning to become adventurers. He assured the driver that their skills were good enough that even their father acknowledged them, so they would be fine. The driver understood and agreed, reminding them that they would be leaving early the next morning and to make sure they were ready. He confirmed that he understood. Iris then suggested they get going, and the two of them headed out into the street. She excitedly pointed at the cute little trinkets and the delicious-looking food. As she looked around with bright eyes, she remarked that the city seemed to have everything, and that walking through it felt like being in a peaceful, normal town. He agreed and explained to her that the Fortress City designation was just a remnant from the past. Now, it was merely a trade hub. He added that the city had originally been built as a buffer to protect the capital from monsters, but ever since an ancient dragon had taken up residence in the mountains nearby, monsters had stayed away. Iris smiled upon hearing that and said that the mention of an ancient dragon brought back memories. She recalled that dragons were said to be the biggest, smartest, and strongest of all monsters. He asked if she had ever seen one before, and she replied that she had seen a few times. She then asked if he thought they existed in that era too, and he said he was sure they still did. As they continued walking and talking, Iris accidentally bumped into someone. When the child reached for her bag, she quickly noticed and slapped the child's hand away. The kid fled at high speed, and he calmly commented that there it was again, the unchanging gap between the rich and the poor. Iris nodded in agreement. He then reflected with a tinge of sadness that wars left behind many orphans and impoverished people, and while they had tried to help as much as they could, it was never enough. He recalled that the church had also been very active in supporting orphans back then. Iris agreed, but noted that many of those saved ended up becoming devout followers or soldiers sent to the front lines. He admitted that the church's intentions may have been questionable, but in many cases, it was probably better than dying in the streets. It was a difficult judgment to make. He added that the church had been a strong presence back then, and that hearing its name felt nostalgic. However, religious groups in their current time seemed like completely different organizations. Iris asked why the church of that earlier time no longer existed in their era, and he responded that it was a mystery. He went on to explain that the organization once called the church preached salvation through heroes and had a slogan about eradicating demons. He speculated that perhaps it had vanished alongside the ancient demons or that something had happened when the heroes' faction split. All he was certain of was that they would need to investigate further to find out. As they spoke, he suddenly noticed a church-like building ahead of them and asked what it was. Iris, clearly intrigued, suggested they check it out, and he agreed, just as curious as she was. They headed toward the church and quietly stepped inside. Walking down the central aisle, they reached the heart of the sanctuary. Iris suddenly froze in shock as her eyes fell on the statue at the front. He looked up as well, and was equally stunned to see the statue of Bacchus standing before them. A moment later, Iris asked him if he was feeling calm now. He replied that he was and apologized to her, admitting that he couldn't believe he was the one who lost his composure. He asked if she was okay, and she calmly responded that while she had been startled, it was her father after all. Nothing surprised her when it came to him. He was impressed by her reaction and how well she understood her father. He then wondered aloud why Bacchus would be made into a statue, but Iris said she couldn't think of a reason. She added that while Bacchus had his amusing moments, he wasn't exactly the type to be worshipped. He found that observation a little too accurate and knew that if Bacchus had heard it, he might have actually cried. Curious, he asked if she knew what had happened to Bacchus after the war. She replied that she didn't and guessed he had just continued fighting somewhere else. He realized that didn't give them much to go on, but then noticed someone approaching. It was a girl carrying a massive sword. She spotted them, gently set the sword on the ground, and slowly pulled down her hood, revealing golden hair and blue eyes. He noted her beauty, but was puzzled to see a priest from that sect, and even more confused by the unnecessarily heavy sword she carried. The girl asked if they needed assistance. He told her it wasn't so much trouble, but admitted that it was his first time entering a church and that his village didn't have places like it, so he felt a little out of place. He asked who she was, and she introduced herself as a missionary priest of the End faith, traveling to rural villages to spread their teachings. When she asked about them, he explained that they were headed to the capital and had only stopped by the church by coincidence. She smiled and remarked that perhaps their meeting there was fated. He then pointed to the statue and asked who it was, admitting that he had been curious. She answered that it was Apostle Bacchus, one of the saviors who rescued the world from chaos. In the teachings of the End faith, Bacchus was venerated as one of their saints. Both he and Iris were shocked and could hardly believe what they were hearing. Iris whispered that she could almost boil tea with the shock, and he whispered back that he felt the same way. He asked the priestess what it meant that Bacchus had saved the world from chaos. She said it was a long story and asked if they would like to hear it. They both agreed. Once they were seated, the priestess began to recount a passage from the myths of the End faith, dating back over 3,000 years. According to the story, humans had once been at war with a race known as the Ancient Demons. The leader of humanity, the hero, had traveled with two companions, the mage and the swordmaster, to defeat the strongest of the demons, the Demon King. He was startled by this part of the tale. The priestess continued, explaining that as the battle escalated, a powerful weapon was discovered. The hero had tried to destroy it but failed to act in time. Just as everything seemed lost, Bacchus appeared and began fighting alongside the hero. She added that Bacchus continued to support him, and thus was venerated as a saint, at least according to the legend. He found it hard to believe that Bacchus had been on the side of the hero. Curious, he asked the priestess if there was supposed to be a saintess among the hero's companions. She appeared surprised, but then composed herself and said there was no record of such a person. She asked where he had heard that, and he replied that he must have confused it with another story. She accepted the explanation, saying that it happened sometimes, and concluded the tale of Bacchus. She then welcomed them to join in prayer if they wished. The priestess approached Bacchus's statue and offered a prayer, asking for his blessing to guide the world and the two of them on their journey. Afterwards, she looked at them and said she would leave them now. He thanked her for explaining everything. She picked up the sword and walked away with it. He then asked Iris what she thought about it. She said it was a strange story and guessed that history simply hadn't been passed down correctly. He agreed, acknowledging that after thousands of years, such distortion was probably inevitable. Still, something about it didn't sit right with him. He told Iris they wouldn't figure it out by staying there and suggested they return to the inn. She agreed, mentioning that she was getting hungry. He looked at Bacchus' statue and said that if Bacchus were there, he'd probably remind them not to forget the booze. Meanwhile, in the forest, the priestess was sitting beside a bonfire when the sword commented that the two kids seemed interesting. She agreed, noting that they said they were heading to the capital and that they were her complete opposites. The sword remarked that she was truly something else and could have stayed in the capital. She responded that it was exactly why she left. There was something she needed to find. The sword asked what it was, but she said it already knew and told it to quit teasing her. The sword asked if she couldn't at least humor it a little, since talking was one of the few pleasures it had left. She reminded the sword that it had brought this on itself and added that, for now, she supposed she could stick around. The next day, Iris and Luru were back in the carriage, continuing their journey. Iris mentioned that in the end, the statue and the myth at the church only deepened the mystery surrounding his father. She noted that no one knew how much of it was true, but even hearing those stories felt like a small victory. He reflected not only on the details about Bacchus, but also the absence of the saintess and the strange mention of a mysterious weapon. He also found the priestess herself to be rather unusual. His thoughts were interrupted when Iris called out to him excitedly, urging him to look outside. He glanced through the window and was amazed to see that they had finally arrived at the capital, Desierto. He asked Iris if he was right in thinking that everyone was waiting there, to which she replied yes and said she couldn't wait to meet them. However, the driver appeared confused when he saw a line of carriages at the entrance and commented that it looked unusually crowded that day. He wondered if something was going on. The driver then called out to a lady walking past and asked if she had a moment. The lady irritably glanced back and asked what was going on. He was excited to see that she was an adventurer and wondered if all of them were as strong as they looked. The driver stepped down from the horse and asked the lady what was happening, given how crowded it was. She replied that there was an event at the plaza the following day, a dissection show for a defeated fire dragon. The driver was amazed to hear that a fire dragon had been taken down and asked if people in the capital casually did things like that. She clarified that it wasn't common and only top-tier adventurers were capable of such feats. This time, it had been two of the most skilled ones. She added that the clan making all the headlines was Elam Kubador with Yumis, both members of the Seekers of Time, which surprised both Iris and him. The driver thanked the lady for explaining and apologized for taking up her time. He then handed her a few gold coins as a token of appreciation. She looked at him in confusion and asked if merchants often did things like that these days. The driver calmly explained that he liked to take care of his connections. She smiled, finding it amusing, and introduced herself as Manaka from the Himeros clan, a nun. She told him that if he ever needed anything from an adventurer, he could count on her. The driver responded that he would keep it in mind and said he'd see her around, which she agreed to before turning to leave. Before walking away, she greeted them, making him smile. He then remarked to Iris that it looked like Gran and the others were doing great. Iris agreed but added that if the traffic was their fault, they could have pushed the event back by at least a week. He agreed with her. Later, the sun was out when they finally arrived at their inn. The driver told him that he would be heading out from the capital the next morning and would leave it at that. He thanked the driver for everything and praised him for being a great help. Looking out the window, he mentioned to Iris that he had been looking forward to sightseeing in the human capital, but it had gotten pretty late. Iris reflected on how, back in the day, demons couldn't even set foot in human cities. Large cities always had holy barriers, and if a demon entered, they would face certain annihilation. Yet now, they could walk in freely, as if it were nothing. She added that it wasn't just demons. Humans had declined as well. She wondered where the once glorious civilization that had pushed demons to the brink had disappeared to. He agreed, and mentioned that maybe the library would have some records of Bacchus. He then informed her that they would check the library first thing in the morning. She asked if they shouldn't visit Gran's clan first, and reminded him that they still needed to find an inn. He realized he had forgotten all about it, but she calmly noted that he tended to get absorbed in things. If he forgot, Gran and the others would be disappointed. He looked at her silently and asked if she really thought so, since they seemed to be having fun without them. She asked if he was feeling left out, and he shyly admitted that they were out there slaying fire dragons while leaving the two of them behind. Iris laughed at his reaction. When he asked what was so funny, she replied that he was just adorable, which caught him off guard. She apologized for teasing him but said she finally understood why her father used to tease him so much. He guessed that Iris had more of Bacchus's spirit in her than she realized, and shyly asked her not to tease him. He then said they would postpone visiting the library and instead go see Gran and the others first thing tomorrow. She nodded and said she understood. The next day, on the streets of the capital, he remembered confidently telling Iris the night before that they would see the others, but now he wasn't sure if they were heading the right way. He stared at the map carefully. Iris looked over it and said that based on what they had, she believed they were on the right path. However, the only note they had was to come to that spot once they reached the capital, which wasn't much to go on. He said it wasn't like they wouldn't have gone, but she reminded him that, to be fair, they had initially planned to visit the library instead. He couldn't argue, knowing he was guilty of that. A moment later, they arrived at the marked location on the map. He was surprised by what he saw and asked if that was really it. In front of them stood a cracked and disordered building, the clan's base. He then noticed the door and a sign confirming that it was the clan Ilam Kubador, Seekers of Time. Realizing it was the right place, he told Iris that it looked like it might collapse at any moment. She told him to look more closely and explained that there was actually some intricate magic built into it. The slight inefficiency in the design, she added, felt very much like Yumi's. While she thought it felt a little lacking, she supposed it was passable. He worriedly asked if it was sturdier than other buildings, hoping that meant it was safe. Deciding to go inside, he knocked on the door and entered. Inside, he saw clean tables and a proper bar area, which made him realize that only the outside looked shabby. The first floor resembled a tavern. A woman came down the stairs noticing customers and asked who they were. He wondered if she was part of the clan and explained that Gran and the others had invited them. After introducing themselves, the woman recognized the names and introduced herself as Chiffon. She explained that she stayed there to keep watch and run the tavern. He reached out to greet Chiffon properly, thinking she seemed a bit scatterbrained and wondering if she could really handle being the one left in charge. As she shook his hand, his stomach growled in hunger. Embarrassed, he apologized and explained that they hadn't eaten lunch yet because they had been trying to find the place. She responded that they must be really hungry and said she would whip something up right away, inviting them to sit wherever they liked. Chiffon laid out vegetables and began chopping them with impressive speed before cooking them expertly with rice. While preparing the food, she mentioned that they were the ones Gran had talked about and that she had expected someone tougher looking, so she was surprised. After serving the food, she warned them that it was hot. Both were surprised by her speed, and he thought Chiffon was unexpectedly efficient. He thanked her, took a bite, and was astonished by how delicious it was. He asked what the dish was, and she calmly replied that it was all made with basic everyday ingredients. He couldn't believe she had made something so good from such normal components, and thought that Gran had definitely found a great addition to the team. Chiffon then apologized, explaining that Gran and Rusty weren't there at the moment. Gran was busy preparing for the fire dragon dissection show, and Rusty was out on a mission somewhere far away. Normally, she said everyone would be eating lunch together around that time. He replied that it was fine. They had arrived earlier than planned. Chiffon commented that their timing might actually be perfect. She took their empty plates and told them that since the tavern was closed for the day, they should all go watch the show together. It would be fun to check it out. Iris agreed excitedly and said they definitely should. Suddenly, Chiffon appeared at the entrance without them noticing and waved energetically, urging them to follow her. She warned that if they didn't hurry, the show might start without them. He remarked to Iris that Chiffon was unexpectedly skilled and asked when she had even gotten to the entrance. Iris replied that, at the very least, Chiffon was stronger than Rusty. Still, he couldn't get over how Chiffon didn't look it at all. A few minutes later, they arrived at the plaza and saw a swarm of people lining up. Iris commented on how crowded it was. Chiffon explained that dragons were rare enough to see, and witnessing one being dissected was even rarer. She added excitedly that tickets cost 3 silver coins each and had completely sold out, meaning the clan had made a fortune. He was surprised to hear that the tickets had sold out and reminded Chiffon that they didn't have any. Chiffon pulled out 3 tickets and told them not to worry. Iris was surprised to see that they were VIP seats, each worth a gold coin, which was quite expensive. Chiffon assured them that there was no charge for them. He excitedly thanked her and asked if Gran was the one performing the dissection. Iris also asked if Yumis would be going on stage. Chiffon explained that Yumis was busy setting up the barriers since dissections could get messy with all the blood. Then, pausing for a moment, she informed them that they were getting close to the plaza. He asked if they were really getting close, noting that he couldn't see anything because of the crowd. Chiffon then grabbed him by the shoulders and lifted him up, asking if he could see now. Shocked, he stammered that he could and confirmed they were definitely close so she could put him down. Chiffon agreed. He was stunned that she lifted him so easily. Chiffon really didn't look like someone capable of that. Minutes later, they arrived at the stage and sat in the VIP seats, noticing that the plaza was completely packed. Chiffon was simply glad they made it in time. She pointed toward the stage and told them to look, as it was starting. Gran stepped forward, called out to everyone, and thanked them for coming, prompting loud cheers from the crowd. He said it was time to get started and signaled to his assistant. The helper removed the cloth covering the platform as Gran announced that the fire dragon they would be dissecting was right there. He explained that while lesser dragons were normally no larger than a human child, this one was a whopping 15 meters long. Gran then proudly raised his sword and declared that it was time to begin the fire dragon dissection show. The crowd erupted in cheers for Gran as he shouted that the fire dragon dismantling show was about to begin. He apologized for the wait and signaled that it was finally time. Curious, he asked Chiffon how they managed to bring in such a massive fire dragon. Chiffon replied that they had used spatial storage and explained that a trading company in the royal capital owned a large-scale version. He leaned toward Iris and asked in a whisper if he was right in thinking that nothing of that size existed anymore. Iris whispered back that he was correct, adding that even the military's equipment of that type was long gone. She then showed him her bag and explained that her brother-in-law had made it for her in the shape of a pouch. She believed its size would be more than enough for a while. He agreed, mentioning that it would be convenient if it were bigger, but right now they lacked the materials and skills to create one. Gran then announced to the audience that after the dissection, he planned to make dragon stew, so anyone interested in trying it should stay. Without further delay, Gran swung his sword and sliced the dragon's head off in a single motion, stunning the crowd. He noticed how clean the cut was and commented on it. Chiffon explained that the sword was called a katana, a special weapon said to be forged by skilled swordsmiths in the East who poured all their expertise into each blade. She told them to look closely at the dragon's head, pointing out that the scales were usually too hard to cut cleanly, often leaving visible marks. However, using a katana preserved the integrity of the material, which maintained its value. As dragon blood sprayed from the incision, a magical shield activated in time to catch it, diverting the liquid into a nearby bucket. Iris noticed it and asked Chiffon what the bucket-like item was. Chiffon explained that it was a magical tool originally designed for water-scarce regions, but adaptable for situations like this. Dragon's blood, she added, was a valuable resource. It served as a potent medicinal ingredient, a flavorful cooking component, and even a catalyst in blacksmithing. She made sure not a single drop was wasted. Gran continued with the dissection, easily slicing beneath the dragon's skin and removing it cleanly. He then carved the meat with precision and smiled when the task was complete. Gran raised his voice once again to tell the crowd that he had finished, drawing a wave of cheers. He had expected Gran to handle the entire disassembly on his own with ease and was about to ask Chiffon something when he noticed she had disappeared. To his surprise, Chiffon appeared on the stage, announcing to the audience that she would now begin cooking the dragon stew. She proudly declared it her signature dish and told everyone to look forward to it. The audience erupted into cheers once again, and to his further amazement, several men started proposing to Chiffon on the spot, leaving him confused about when that had even happened. Chiffon quickly began the cooking process, expertly chopping the dragon meat into bite-sized pieces along with vegetables and placing them into the soup she had already prepared. She stirred the mixture in a massive pot with the help of her assistants. The fragrant aroma of the stew soon filled the plaza. He turned to Iris and commented with excitement that it looked delicious. Iris agreed and wondered aloud if it was free to eat. Before either of them could say more, someone behind them answered that the food was indeed free. Gran appeared from behind and pulled them both into a tight hug, saying that it had been a while. He replied that it was getting hard to breathe and asked Gran to let them go, which Gran did immediately, apologizing with a laugh. Gran told him he was glad to see them doing well, and he responded that Gran looked great too. He then asked about Yumi's and whether she was not with Gran. Gran explained that Yumis was still working behind the scenes to maintain the magical barrier, and, unlike others, couldn't control it from a distance. He replied that he understood, even as Yumi's elsewhere fumed in frustration, holding the barrier while thinking about how badly she wanted to eat the dragon stew. Iris mentioned to Gran that Mi and Yuri could use magic even when they were somewhat far apart. Gran acknowledged it as true, but explained that it was fundamentally different from the kind of modern magic they were using now. Because it was ingrained into their bodies, common sense often got in the way of understanding or replicating it. He then suggested they set the topic aside for now, noting that the stew should be ready soon and they should join the line. A moment later, Luru received his bowl of dragon stew and took a spoonful. His eyes lit up as he excitedly exclaimed how delicious it was, adding that it had been a long time since he had last eaten dragon. Iris agreed and said it was exquisite, which surprised Gran. He asked if they often ate dragon meat back in their time. Luru replied that they didn't eat it regularly and explained that they only had dragon when it was hunted during an expedition. Demons, he added, never saw dragons as enemies. Iris elaborated that it was actually humans who hunted dragons more frequently, especially to use their parts and weapons during that era. Gran understood then why dragon materials were so commonly used, but his attention shifted when he noticed that Chiffon's serving line was unusually long. He explained to them that the tavern was open to the public and that Chiffon's appearance and cooking skills were well known across the capital. While he was glad business was thriving, he admitted that Chiffon had been complaining about a labor shortage for quite some time. Luru asked why they hadn't hired more help, especially if the business was doing so well. Gran began to answer but was cut off when Chiffon, clearly stressed, shouted at him, asking why he was the only one talking so casually and having fun. She reminded him that there were still about 500 people left to serve and demanded that he help if he was finished eating. Gran sighed and said it seemed the work environment was a bit rough, which Luru could understand after hearing Chiffon's complaint. Gran then rolled up his sleeves and walked over to Chiffon, telling her that it couldn't be helped and that he would start helping with the distribution. Chiffon praised Gran for stepping in. Iris turned to Luru and noted that he and Gran seemed to get along pretty well. Luru agreed and told her he was looking forward to the life ahead from that point on. Later, back at the tavern, Gran raised his mug of beer and proposed a toast to the success of the Dragon Dissection show and the beginning of a new journey for their newest companions. Everyone raised their glasses and cheered together. Luru stood with Iris, watching the celebration, and remarked that there were quite a few members, at a glance, around 20 people. Iris responded that the group was medium-sized and pointed out the presence of beastkin and members of the ancient tribe who hadn't been around the village. The diversity of races made her feel nostalgic. Luru agreed and said it felt like a miracle, something he once dreamed of. Gran asked if they were enjoying themselves, and before either could answer, Yumi's, clearly drunk, responded that she was enjoying it because she was laughing so much. She turned to Luru and asked if she was right in assuming he was having fun. He confirmed that he was and thanked her for her hard work. She smiled, saying she was glad to hear that. While Gran admitted that things did feel a bit lonely without Rusty and the others, Luru asked if they were on a job, and Gran confirmed it, though he added that they were expected back either the next day or the day after, since the request wasn't particularly difficult. Luru sighed, realizing that Rusty and the others were already doing well as adventurers. Gran and Yumi's exchanged a look. Then Gran nodded and explained that the client for that job was a clan known as the Seekers of the Age. He asked Gran if there really had been a request from the clan he was once part of, and Gran replied that there was a bit of a backstory to it. Gran began explaining that recently, 3 newcomers had joined their clan. Though young, they were just kids among the more experienced members. Gran glanced over at a table with 3 older adventurers as he continued. The kids had taken on their first official request, what was supposed to be a basic, low-level herb collection task. Gran asked if he was right in thinking such missions were fine for beginners. Luru agreed that they were, but Gran went on to explain that the issue was where the herbs grew, on the slopes of Njort's mountain, which took 2 days to reach from the clan. Luru responded with understanding, and Gran added that because a round trip in 1 day was impossible, the area was considered dangerous. Still, those kids weren't weak, and before anyone realized it, they had already accepted the request and left town. Yumis added that, to ensure the kids weren't discovered, she had asked Rusty and the others to quietly follow and protect them. Iris asked why it had to be Rusty's group specifically, and Yumis replied that while it would have been fine to send other members, they worried about what might happen if the kids were caught. Gran added that kids had their own pride, and it was better for them to be with those they admired, like Rusty and his team, rather than with adults. This surprised and confused both Luru and Iris. Gran laughed at their reaction and told them they would understand once the group returned. He explained that the kids looked up to Rusty and the others and even referred to them as senpai or big brother. Luru smiled upon hearing it and remarked that he would have to make sure not to laugh in front of them. Iris agreed with a laugh of her own. The next day, they arrived at the Adventurers Guild and were surprised at how clean it was. Though Luru had expected as much from a facility in the royal capital, Iris pointed out the central desk, saying it looked like the registration area. Luru agreed and suggested they go check it out. They approached the desk and informed the receptionist that he would like to register as an adventurer. The lady was momentarily startled but quickly handed them the registration forms. Iris, noticing the woman's big heart, glared at it while Luru asked if he should just fill out the required details. The receptionist, a bit flustered, confirmed that he should. Still glaring, Iris remained silent. Luru asked about the section on special skills or combat style, and the woman explained that it was considered each adventurer's selling point. She went on to say that most newcomers registered solo, and the guild often assisted in forming parties or matching them with clans since working in groups helped reduce the risk of death. Luru responded that they wouldn't need that and handed over a document. The receptionist examined it and saw that it was both a letter of introduction and a signed clan membership agreement. This meant they had already been invited into a clan. She added the information to their forms and told them they were lucky. Seekers of Time was considered one of the elite clans of the current age. She then asked if she was right in assuming they were siblings, which they confirmed. Turning to a chest behind her, she explained that she would now input their information using a machine based on ancient clan technology. As she placed their documents into the chest, the machine lit up with glowing lines. Once the process was complete, she informed them that their adventurer registration and clan membership procedures were now finished. She handed them their adventurer licenses and explained that these served as official proof of their status. Luru checked his and saw that his class was listed as Beginner Low. He asked what the class meant, and she explained that it was a ranking system based on strength, beginner, intermediate, advanced, and special, with each rank divided into lower, middle, and upper tiers. She added that everyone started at the lowest tier and their rank could improve with time and experience. She handed him additional documents with more detailed information, which he accepted with gratitude. With a bright smile, she congratulated them and said they were officially adventurers. The other adventurers nearby overheard and clapped for them. Luru thanked her again and said they would be on their way, but the receptionist stopped them and presented another document. Curious, he asked what it was. She explained that a tournament would be held next month in the royal capital and that it was recommended for beginners, offering a good opportunity to gain practical experience. Luru replied that he appreciated the suggestion, but admitted that they weren't the type to participate in such things. Disappointed, she apologized for the recommendation. Feeling guilty, Luru added that depending on the clan's stance, he might consider it. That lifted her spirits, and she thanked him warmly. She then introduced herself as Aaron and gave them a friendly farewell. Luru waved back and Aaron bowed in return. As they walked away, Iris asked what he thought about someone like Aaron. Confused, he replied that she seemed energetic and competent. Iris clarified that she hadn't meant Aaron as a person but something else, gesturing subtly toward the chest. Surprised, he awkwardly responded that he supposed people who liked that kind of thing would like it. Maybe even Bacchus. Then he realized what he'd just said in front of Bacchus's daughter and regretted it. Iris sighed, told him never mind, and muttered that it was a mistake to ask. She turned and began walking away, leaving him more confused than ever. He was about to follow her when he bumped into someone. The person quickly apologized, but Luru admitted it had been his fault. Then he looked up and was shocked to realize that the one he bumped into was Rusty. Rusty was about to say something to him when a kid appeared behind Rusty and arrogantly asked if he was a rookie, judging by the color of his adventurer's badge. The kid then shouted at him, saying that crashing into someone like that was rude and that he should apologize to his senior, Rusty, which surprised him. He asked the kid what he meant by Senior Rusty, which only angered the kid more. The boy shouted, asking if he seriously didn't know who Rusty was, then loudly declared that he was definitely a rookie. The kid proudly explained that Rusty was amazing and the most accomplished among the recent rookies, which made Rusty blush. The kid then shouted again, accusing him of being rude since earlier. He began to wonder if this was the kid Grant had mentioned. He stayed quiet and looked at Rusty, who whispered an apology to him. Trying not to laugh, he turned around as he could no longer hold it in, startling both Rusty and the kid. The kid angrily asked if he was laughing, and he replied that he didn't mean it like that, it had just hit his funny bone. Still chuckling, he tried to hold back his laughter again, prompting the kid to shout that he must be doing it on purpose. Iris then called to him and told him that it seemed like he was unintentionally provoking the kid by laughing so much. At that moment, someone appeared behind her, making her look back in surprise. Meanwhile, the kid continued speaking, saying that he didn't understand Rusty's abilities, and that if he had witnessed Rusty's achievements firsthand, he wouldn't be able to laugh like that. Yet he kept laughing and told the kid that he'd like to see it for himself soon, which made Rusty even shyer. The kid shouted for him to stop laughing already, but then paused as a flyer flew toward him. He caught it and was surprised by what he saw. The kid then showed the flyer to him and shouted that they would have a duel in the tournament next month, which stopped his laughter. He explained to the kid that they didn't intend to participate, which only angered the boy further. The kid accused him of mocking them and trying to run away. The boy explained that the tournament only allowed those who passed the qualifiers to enter the main event, and the chances of them actually fighting were low. Therefore, whoever advanced further would be considered the winner. He responded that if that was the case, it didn't have to be through the tournament. But the kid insisted, telling him that Rusty would also be participating. If he realized he couldn't beat Rusty after that, he would feel compelled to apologize. That made him realize the kid genuinely respected Rusty, and it became harder for him to bring up that he and Rusty were actually childhood friends. Suddenly, two ladies appeared behind Rusty, Mii and Yuri, clinging tightly to his arms. He was about to greet them when Yuri stopped him and whispered a greeting back, signaling for him to be quiet. Mii then winked and whispered that she would explain later. The two ladies then dragged Rusty away, leaving everyone else confused and wondering what was going on. He then whispered to Iris, asking if those two girls were also being treated as seniors. Iris replied that something must have happened. He asked Iris if they should return to the clan, and she said yes. The kid then told them he would report the completed quest to reception, showing them the bag of herbs. But before they left, the kid stopped him and asked for his name. He introduced himself and introduced Iris as well. The kid then introduced himself as Gaia and reminded him not to forget their promise about the tournament. Gaia swung the bag of herbs while shouting that they should do their best, with the determination to stand shoulder to shoulder with Rusty and the others. One of the older adventurers noticed the herb bag Gaia was swinging and shouted at him not to swing around medicinal herbs, causing Gaia to stutter and apologize. Iris commented that Gaia didn't seem like a bad child, to which he agreed, recognizing that Gaia was just young and reckless. Iris then laughingly told him that, when he said it, his understanding somehow felt different. He smiled as she laughed and asked why she had been angry earlier, which left her speechless for a moment. She replied that it was nothing and that she was just a little too anxious. He asked what she was anxious about, but she turned around and started walking, saying they should head back. She also wanted to hear me and Yuri's earlier explanation. That reminded him about them as well. A moment later, they arrived back at the Seeker of Time Guild. Chiffon greeted them and told them that she felt kind of sorry for the two of them. Iris looked confused and asked Chiffon what she meant. Was it because of the strange atmosphere she had sensed from the Iron Clan members who were smiling and staring at them from behind? Chiffon replied that she was right and confirmed that all of it had happened while Yumis and the others were still at the Adventurers Guild. Chiffon then informed them that just a moment ago, Yumis had gathered everyone's attention and told them she needed their help with something. Yuri asked what it was, and Mi commented that Yumis had that look on her face, the one she wore when she found something interesting. Laughing, Yumis told them that she just happened to see something at the Adventurers Guild earlier. Luru had accidentally bumped into Rusty, and some clueless bystanders started picking a fight with Luru over it. Yuri and Mi laughed, immediately understanding who Yumis was referring to. Yumis added that somehow it led to the two of them deciding to compete based on their tournament rankings. Grant asked if it was a duel, to which Yumis confirmed with a yes, then told them that since it was a rare opportunity, she wanted to ask if they thought they should fully support the duel between Gaia and Luru, while holding Mi and Yuri in her arms. Chiffon then explained that that's how the conversation had gone. He sighed and remarked that Yumi's foolishness was as consistent as ever, but Iris sighed in relief, realizing it wasn't bad news, and confirming that the person she saw earlier truly was Yumi's. Now it made sense why Mi and Yuri had taken Rusty away. He then asked Chiffon if Gran had agreed to it as well. Chiffon replied that, surprisingly, Gran had indeed agreed. She explained that despite everything, Gran and Yumi's got along well, so unless it was something serious, they rarely opposed each other. Chiffon then added that it might be a bit hard to say, but she asked if she was right that they were supposed to start living there today. He confirmed it was true, but warned Chiffon that if she was suggesting they camp out now, it would be a problem. Chiffon assured him she wouldn't say anything that cruel. Rather than staying at the clan's main base, she wondered if they could stay at a different location. She informed them that Yumis had lived a long life and owned several properties in the royal capital. He responded that he had heard ancient clans that came from the forest often held a lot of wealth, and he didn't mind staying anywhere, as long as they didn't have to camp out. Still, he asked Chiffon why it came to this. Chiffon explained that it was related to what she'd just been talking about. It called for Yumis' full support. Chiffon went on to say that when everyone agreed with Yumis, she managed to convince them that this kind of opportunity doesn't come often. She wanted Gaia and the others to challenge it strictly as fellow beginner adventurers. That's why she was wondering if it would be possible to keep the fact that Luru and Iris were mentors to Rusty and the others a secret from Gaia and his group. Chiffon concluded by saying that that was all. Iris responded that she understood. If they stayed at the clan's main base, their identity would be discovered immediately. Chiffon agreed and assured them that Yumi said she would stop the plan if either of them refused. He admitted that it did feel a bit like they were deceiving Gaia and that it was in somewhat poor taste, but having rivals might push Gaia to train harder. He guessed it could just be a small surprise in the end. He then mentioned that their clan affiliation had already been registered, but Chiffon told him that since the tournament didn't specifically ask about clan affiliation, as long as he didn't bring it up, it would be fine. She asked if he was going to hide it and enter, and he replied that it didn't seem like there would be any issues. Chiffon then asked Iris what she thought. Iris said she had no objection, then whispered to Chiffon that being together with her dear brother was perfect. Chiffon was thrilled by the comment and told Iris she understood, which caused Iris to panic and signal Chiffon to be quiet. Chiffon then handed them a map to their accommodations. He accepted it, thanked her, and said they would head over right away. He asked if Yumis wasn't around, and Chiffon replied that Yumis was quite busy today but said she'd come by later once things had settled down. He acknowledged that he understood. He then asked Iris if they should go, and she replied yes. They thanked Chiffon for the meal before leaving, and Chiffon waved goodbye, reminding them to take care. Once they had left the guild, Yumis looked up and said they had already gone, asking if it was okay to come down now. Gran and Yumis descended. Gran sighed in relief that things had gone well, while Yumis thanked Chiffon for her efforts and asked for some juice. Chiffon slammed a glass of juice down in front of them and glared at them angrily. Gran asked Chiffon if that wasn't a bit too sloppy for the leader and sub-leader. Chiffon replied that it felt like they were tricking them, and she felt like she ended up helping carry the load too. Yumis assured her not to worry, and asked if it was true that Luru and Iris agreed to it. Chiffon confirmed it, but asked if Yumis had some kind of grudge against them. Yumis replied that it wasn't exactly a grudge, just that a long time ago they had really startled her, and now she wanted to be the one to surprise them for once. Chiffon then asked Gran if they were really that passionate about it. Gran replied yes, and said that after all, the tournament was something they had prepared for Luru. A moment earlier, Gran and Yumis had met with other guild leaders. Manaka asked what exactly they intended to do by gathering the leaders and vice leaders of each clan like that. She pointed at Gran, who was busy drinking wine. Gran looked at them and asked what they thought about the recent tournaments. Manaka replied that they were decent, and the man next to her agreed. The man told Gran that letting new adventurers participate to practice their skills was more than enough to keep things exciting, and asked if something was wrong. Gran replied that it wasn't bad, then got straight to the point. He informed them that in the upcoming tournament, he would be participating too. Everyone was shocked upon hearing Gran's words. Manhwa reminded Gran that his class was special rank, and adventurers were only allowed to participate up to upper advanced level, which was the unspoken rule of the tournament. Gran told them to just hear him out and asked if they thought the quality of newcomers had been declining recently, leaving the room in silence. An elderly man finally replied that it was true. Blues Soltita, the leader of the Kyo clan, whose name Uvezd meant angel, admitted that he didn't really want to say it, but it did seem to be the case. Gran responded that, in his view, the root cause was a lack of aspiration among adventurers. Upon hearing this, a man adjusted his glasses. He was Shui, the clan leader of Foster Bibliotheca, Jester's library, whose name meant relief. Shui responded that Gran might be right, as only small children dreamed of becoming adventurers. But as they grew older, those dreams gradually faded. The lady next to Manhwa agreed with Shui. She was Agnos, the vice clan leader of Manhwa, the sisters, and her name meant strength. Agnos added that children in the royal capital didn't even see real adventurers seriously fighting, so for them, it was like aspiring to be a fairy tale princess. Gran agreed with her and explained that this was exactly why he wanted to break through the current stagnation. Manhwa then asked Gran if he truly intended to participate, and if so, wouldn't that crush the dreams of the newcomers, since they'd lose their chance to win? Gran laughed and replied that it wasn't quite like that. He explained that the newcomer who had recently joined them was actually quite energetic. This irritated Manhwa, who accused him of bragging, but Gran said he wasn't. He was treating the individual as a newcomer, but even so, he admitted he wasn't confident he could win against him. This revelation shocked everyone. Manhwa asked if he was joking and whether he was seriously talking about a low-ranked adventurer. Gran confirmed it and told them that was exactly the point. He continued by saying that if a newcomer, just a beginner-rank adventurer, were to defeat well-known strong warriors one after another and win the championship, it would be like a hero being born in the royal capital. Though, he added, it might be a bit of an exaggeration. Laughing, Gran then asked if it didn't sound interesting, and how about they all join the tournament themselves after such a long time. The room fell into deeper shock. Manhwa voiced concern, telling Yumis that if they got serious, there could be issues with the venue's safety. But Yumis assured them that it would be fine, as this time the old clans would cooperate to create a barrier of unprecedented scale. She added that the barrier wouldn't be broken even by high-level magic from special rank adventurers. She would make an absolute barrier. Shui stood up in shock upon hearing that the old clans were cooperating. He reminded them that since ancient times it had been forbidden for the old clans to cooperate directly with individual nations. Shui then asked worriedly if there wouldn't be trouble when the old clan leaders found out. But Yumis brightly assured him that it was fine. She had already gotten permission from each clan leader. She admitted she hadn't expected approval, but it was granted. She wondered aloud why, yet smiled and said that those old men were often more excited about such things than they seemed. Shui was stunned. Gran then set down his wine glass and told them that they all had to participate in the martial arts tournament. He asked if they could also invite any skilled acquaintances, even those referred to as monsters. The leaders were speechless for a moment, then exchanged looks and smiled excitedly. One by one they agreed. Yumi smiled and told them she expected no less from top-tier adventurers and knew they would be quick to act. That would be a big help. Gran then assured everyone that this martial arts tournament would definitely be an event to remember. Meanwhile, in a quiet church, a saintess knelt on the floor, praying silently before the altar. Then she heard someone approaching. A man called out to her, prompting the saintess to rise and turn toward him. The man immediately knelt down and apologized for disturbing her during her prayer. The saintess quietly stepped closer and bent down, her face nearing his. Gently, she wiped the sweat from his forehead. The man blushed, shocked, and asked what she was doing. The man tilted his head away from the saintess, admitting that her presence was overwhelming. She calmly acknowledged his efforts, noting that he had come all the way to find her. And this, showing him kindness, was the best way she could express her gratitude. His face flushed even deeper, unable to believe that someone of such vastly different status would treat him with such care. In that moment, he truly thought she was like a goddess. Observing that he seemed to have calmed down, she asked what had brought him there in such a hurry. The man immediately retrieved a folded paper from his pocket and handed it to her, urging her to look at it. It was a flyer for a tournament, now open even to special class masters. He explained that this was possible because the ancient clans would be establishing an absolute barrier to protect the arena. The revelation stunned her, and she began to wonder whether the ancient clans were finally cooperating. The idea seemed implausible. Those clans had long refused any requests, yet now they had accepted one from the kingdom of Leonard. She could not imagine what could have prompted such a change. The man suggested that perhaps the cooperation was limited solely to the tournament. She responded that if this truly marked a turning point for Leonard, then she must attend. The man, caught off guard by her sudden conviction, stammered in agreement. He informed her that an official invitation had arrived in her name and that a reply confirming her attendance would be sent shortly. She turned with resolve, expressing that the Holy Divine Church would now be treated as a state guest, which must surely be the guidance of the holy deity, Saiwasa Chidodze. As she grasped the door handle, she made a solemn vow to bring divine protection to the holy kingdom of Arca. Opening the door, she declared that she would offer tranquil prayers to its citizens. She added that she would go to the holy temple to consult with His Holiness the Saint, and acknowledged that the man must still be tired. She advised him to rest for a while, bringing tears to his eyes as he thanked her quietly. As he stood in awe, a warm blue light emerged from her body as she cast a blessing. Its purpose, to bring rightful light to a world that had lost its way. The light formed wings upon her back. Before departing, she informed the man of her leave and ascended swiftly into the air. The man remained in place, mesmerized by a small, glowing feather that floated down before him. Recognizing it as part of the Saintess's wings, he clutched it tightly to his chest. Elsewhere, Luru envisioned himself once again as the Demon King, walking a familiar path. He knew that if he continued forward, there might be no return. At that moment, Bacchus appeared behind him and called out. Luru, surprised, questioned why he was there, but Bacchus casually responded, noting that it was quite the greeting. He stated his intention clearly. He had come to fight by Luru's side. Luru acknowledged Bacchus not only as a subordinate, but as his one and only friend, someone blessed by the spirit of fire and marked by rare red hair among demons. Still, he insisted that the confrontation ahead was not something Bacchus or anyone else could face. The reason was a woman, an anomaly among humans. He could not identify her origin and wondered if she was what people called the will of the gods. Yet, as someone capable of standing before her, he felt he had been born for this role. Their powers mirrored each other, like two sides of the same coin. The battle between them was inevitable. He urged Bacchus to return to his post, stating that his involvement would be futile. Bacchus shouted in frustration, arguing that standing against the woman did not mean instant death. If he could endure even briefly, he could be of help. Luru conceded that if it were only the Saintess, there might be hope. But now, her guard had also received divine blessings, clad in armor brimming with holy energy. He placed a firm hand on Bacchus's shoulder, acknowledging that it might be difficult to understand, but pleading for his trust. Bacchus was ready to argue, but recognized that Luru's mind was made up. With a curse and a heavy heart, he warned Luru not to dare die. Luru smiled at his friend's words and turned back toward the path, stating that he could not afford to lose. A sudden light struck Luru's eyes. He awoke, blinking in confusion, only to see Iris drawing back the window curtains and greeting him with a warm smile. He returned Iris's greeting, then asked if it wasn't a bit too early, shielding his eyes from the bright morning light. Iris sighed and noted that human bodies were inconvenient in that way. Still, she reminded him that they were scheduled to take on a request with Gaia and the others first thing that morning. He responded that she should wake him at that time, which immediately made him remember their conversation from the previous night, specifically when Gaia had arrived at their room. He had apologized to Gaia for making him come all that way, but Gaia, holding a bag of vegetables, replied that it was no problem. When asked about the vegetables, Gaia explained that they were a farewell gift from his mentor. He guessed aloud that Gaia must have been scolded. He then told Gaia that he appreciated the gift, but questioned whether it was really okay. He assured Gaia that simply teaching them how to accept requests would be more than enough. Gaia insisted he not hold back. Despite not being from the same clan, he was still a senior. Gaia then asked if they were unaffiliated and had no one else to rely on. He went on to explain that his party had just taken on their first request recently, and that he had joined his parents on their missions several times. Now, it was his turn to teach them the basics of being adventurers. That made him realize he may have underestimated Gaia by worrying too much from the beginning. He knew it was true that Gaia's parents were accomplished adventurers and had passed down a lot of knowledge. Gratefully, he thanked Gaia and told him he was counting on him. Gaia then shifted the topic to the next day's plan. He excitedly proposed that they accept a quest first thing in the morning, complete it, and return the same day. It struck him as a very adventurer-like mindset. They agreed on the plan and shook hands, finalizing their mission for the following day. Back in the present, they made their way down to the kitchen. He reflected on the promise he had made with Gaia and remembered that, as a demon, he could once go 3 days without sleep. But now, in a human body, that was no longer possible. His thoughts were interrupted as Gaia raised a hand to get his attention and called him over. Gaia informed him that they were waiting, and as he approached, he greeted the group. One of the girls apologized for bothering him so early in the morning and introduced herself as Yuyu, a magician and member of a cat-like beast race. The other girl introduced herself as Shalika, the healer. She noted that even though Gaia might have caused some trouble, he had made breakfast, and she apologized for that as well. He smiled, realizing how different both girls were compared to Gaia. Still, with a swordsman, a magician, and a healer, it made for a well-balanced party composition. Iris explained that the ingredients for the meal were what they had received the day before, and she hoped it suited everyone's tastes. Gaia immediately asked for a second serving, having already finished his food, which embarrassed the two girls sitting next to him. Yuyu stopped Gaia, pointing out that it was rude and reminding him that he had been scolded for that kind of behavior. She also reminded him that the vegetables were given as an apology in the first place, which caused Gaia to blush and whisper to her not to say it aloud. Yuyu shouted that as adventurers, if they couldn't manage their hunger properly, they wouldn't be able to complete their quests. Shalika tried to calm them both down as their friendly bickering escalated, causing him and Iris to laugh. He thought to himself that they had never had such a lively breakfast before. A few minutes later, with breakfast finished, Gaia announced that it was about time to head to the Adventurers Guild. Iris stopped them for a moment, saying she had prepared bento boxes for everyone and also had wrapping materials if needed. The three younger adventurers opened their bento boxes and were amazed by the food inside. When they didn't immediately respond, Iris worried aloud whether they found it unnecessary. Gaia quickly assured her that it was truly appreciated and he hadn't expected her to prepare so much. Yu apologized for the disturbance, while Shalika offered a graceful thank you, making Iris feel relieved. She then handed Luru's portion to him, and he thanked her for preparing it. Upon opening it, he noticed that each sandwich was designed to taste good even when cooled. He admired her thoughtfulness and apologized for making her go to such lengths. She disagreed, saying she might have made a little too much. After all, she added, the way to the heart is through the stomach, something that left him confused. Gaia called out to them, reminding everyone that it was time to get going. Iris responded that she understood, then turned to him and said they should leave. He agreed immediately, knowing that this would be their first official job as adventurers. A short while later, they arrived at the Adventurers Guild and approached the request board. However, there were already many young adventurers crowded around, trying to get quests. He asked Gaia if he was right in thinking it was unusually crowded, but Gaia had already disappeared. He looked ahead and saw Gaia and the others sprinting toward the request board. Iris pointed out that they had already gone ahead, and he asked if they weren't supposed to be teaching the younger ones the rules of being adventurers. Watching the scene unfold, he saw the kids snatching quest papers from one another. He remarked to Iris that it looked like an actual brawl, and despite the early hour, the atmosphere was intense. At that moment, someone approached them from behind and remarked that this kind of chaos was typical among beginners. He turned around and was surprised to see Rusty, accompanied by Yuri and me. He glanced back and noticed that Gaia and the others were no longer nearby. Turning to Rusty, me, and Yuri, he remarked that it had been a while since the four of them had a chance to talk. Rusty nodded, acknowledging that while they seemed in good spirits, they did look like novice adventurers compared to how they were back in the village. Behind them, a group of young adventurers began whispering excitedly upon recognizing Rusty, calling him cool. Observing the reaction, he teased Rusty, saying it looked like he was surrounded by fans. Rusty, clearly embarrassed, tried to hide his face and urged him to stop, finding the attention a bit too much. He found it all nostalgic and, remembering something they had mentioned earlier, asked if it was really true that only novice adventurers behaved that way. Mi explained that, as beginners, most requests were simple day trips. Starting early increased the success rate and allowed them to return before sunset. She pointed at the kids arguing over a single quest, noting that situations like that didn't happen too often. Curious, he asked if there was no sense of compromise among them. Yuri replied that such values typically developed after advancing to higher ranks. She added that quarreling was actually an important experience. Adventuring often followed a first-come, first-served rule, so learning restraint while the risks were still low was a critical lesson. He was left speechless by the practicality of it, but understood that even after just a few months apart, the three had grown tremendously. He whispered to Iris whether it was normal for children to grow that fast. Iris whispered back, reassuring him not to be discouraged, since demons naturally matured faster than humans. He agreed, though still surprised. Turning back to Rusty, he commented that by the way they spoke, it no longer seemed like they were novice adventurers. Rusty confirmed that they had recently advanced to lower-level intermediate rank, meaning they were now officially recognized as full-fledged adventurers. Amazed, he expressed admiration, while Iris mentioned how hard they had been working since leaving the village. The three looked slightly shy at the praise. Rusty recalled that when they had left the village, they had participated in a mock battle and had been thoroughly beaten by a master. But thanks to that experience, they managed to survive and learn. Suddenly, Gaia returned and called out to Luru and Iris, asking why they weren't following. He then spotted Rusty and looked surprised, but quickly pushed aside his fan-like admiration to inform them that they needed to take a request immediately. Without hesitation, Gaia grabbed both of their hands and dragged them toward the board, apologizing to Rusty for the abrupt exit. Watching them go, Rusty told me and Yuri that he would have liked to join Leroux and the others if it were up to him. Me reminded him that it was impossible now, as they were under direct orders from the chief. Yuri agreed, reassuring Rusty that Iris and Leroux would catch up in no time and they could take on a request together then. Rusty nodded and said that after spending a few months on the field, he had come to realize that Leroux and Iris couldn't even be compared to most top-ranked adventurers. He added that he couldn't wait to see the expressions on Gaia and the others' faces when they finally understood just who their mentors were. At the request board, he noticed that there were more people than expected, and everyone seemed eager to take on a quest. He raised his voice to ask Gaia what kind of request they should go for. Gaia replied with enthusiasm that a herb-gathering day trip would be best. They quickly spotted the herb-gathering quest in the center of the board. With just a glance to each other as a signal, they sprinted forward. Swiftly weaving through the crowd of children, they reached the board, grabbing the quest and scooping up Yu and Shalika in the process. Their first mission as a group had succeeded. They gently set down the dizzy girls, and he asked Gaia if everything was really okay. Gaia admitted that he wasn't great at dealing with situations like that. Looking down at the quest paper in his hand, Leroux thought about how that explained why Gaia hadn't been able to grab the first request by word of mouth. But this time, it seemed there was nothing to worry about. A moment later, they arrived at the forest and began gathering herbs. He explained to the group that the goal of the quest was to collect large amounts of starvine, a herb used in healing potions. Despite their efforts, it still felt like they hadn't gathered enough. Gaia reminded him that it was their first request, and completing simple tasks like this was the first step to becoming full-fledged adventurers. The reminder surprised him, but he agreed and said they would push themselves further. Iris eagerly agreed as well, and Gaia smiled at their enthusiasm. Iris glanced at the baskets and noticed that the two girls had already filled theirs. Yu commented that the three of them were quite capable, while Shalika added that they had helped their parents a lot in the past, so they would likely get the hang of things quickly. He admitted to himself that it was probably just a matter of getting used to it. Still, he couldn't relate. He had once delegated such tasks to subordinates as a demon king. Iris remarked that she too found it difficult to keep up due to her lack of experience, having been a noble and a servant to the demon king. But both of them remained determined to gather more herbs and complete their quest successfully. Hours passed, and eventually everyone's bags were full of herbs. Gaia looked astonished, realizing that Luru and Iris had ended up collecting almost twice as much as he and his team had. Luru humbly responded that it was thanks to having good mentors. Gaia proudly agreed, but then Iris called out to him in a worried voice, pointing ahead. In front of them, someone had collapsed on the ground. The trio were horrified as they saw a person and a dog lying motionless on the ground. They questioned whether the two were dead, but he immediately rushed over to check. After a quick examination, he confirmed that they were both alive, just sleeping, which made Gaia sigh in relief. He pointed out that it was getting dark and leaving them there would be dangerous, so he offered to carry them. He asked Gaia if he could place them on his back, and Gaia agreed. Iris turned to the girls and suggested they carry the dog, to which Yu nodded. As Shalika and Gaia approached the woman to lift her, she suddenly sat up and stood with surprising speed, startling both of them. He simply wondered how she was moving so abruptly after lying there. The woman tilted her head and began following a scent, prompting Gaia to ask if someone was chasing her. She came to a stop at Iris's bag. Iris asked what she wanted, and the woman appeared to recall something. She reached into the bag and pulled out the leftover bento Iris had packed, explaining that she had placed it there just in case the initial food supply wasn't enough. Iris asked the woman if she would like to eat it, and the woman hesitantly asked if it was truly all right and if it was being given to her. Iris turned to confirm, and he agreed. The woman then bowed respectfully toward the meal before beginning to eat with great appetite. He noticed how voraciously she ate, and Iris remarked that the woman seemed incredibly hungry. Just then, the dog's paw lightly struck the woman's leg as it growled softly. Understanding her pet's intention, the woman asked Iris if she could give some food to her child as well. Iris nodded and assured her that it was fine as long as the food was suitable. The woman split the sandwich with the dog, explaining that the dog was a little special. A minute later, she finished eating and thanked them for the hearty meal, which the dog also seemed to approve of. He asked the woman who she was. She replied that her nickname was Kikyo, and her real name was Asagiri Kyuka. She introduced her dog as Fuka, specifying that she was female. He observed that Fuka was clearly a smart dog and said he would prefer to call her Kikyo. Noting that lingering in that spot would be dangerous, he asked what she planned to do as they were heading back to the capital. Kikyo eagerly raised her hand, stating that they would like to accompany them and hoped to be introduced to an inn. He smiled, feeling somewhat deflated, but also recognizing the inexplicable and irresistible aura surrounding Kikyo. He said he understood and asked if they should get going. Kikyo responded with cheerful enthusiasm. A short time later, they arrived back in the capital and went straight to the inn. However, the receptionist regretfully informed them that all rooms were fully booked. Kikyo looked devastated, having pinned her hopes on that one last option. She expressed disbelief and sadness, saying that it had been their final chance since other inns were also full. Feeling bad for her, he explained that they had taken longer than expected to submit the medicinal herbs, which was why they were late, and that Gaia and the others had already returned. Kikyo assured him that it was fine, as it had been her choice to tag along. Besides, being turned away from inns was a common experience for them. He offered her a stay at their place, as long as it was okay with her. Kikyo's mood brightened instantly. She asked if he truly meant it, and he replied that they were also just borrowing the place and there were extra rooms available. Kikyo bowed deeply in thanks, and Fuka mirrored the gesture. As they walked back to Yumisa's apartment, he asked Kikyo why she had been lying on the roadside like that. Kikyo was startled and stammered through her explanation. She said that during their journey they had run out of inns and thought they might find work in the next town. She admitted that it had been a mistake to leave the previous inn with so little food. Fuka barked in agreement. Iris realized that Kikyo had been traveling alone and asked where she came from, since she didn't seem local. Kikyo answered that she was from the Far East, a distance that couldn't normally be traveled with ease. He looked at her and asked if she was referring to the country of the Tusho craftsmen. Kikyo lit up with excitement upon hearing that and asked if he knew about her country. He explained that he had recently seen an acquaintance using a katana. Kikyo excitedly added that it wasn't just theory. Those swords were the real deal, one of the techniques her homeland took pride in. Iris asked if her outfit was also made using one of those traditional techniques. Kikyo asked if her attire looked strange, then explained that it was called a miko shozoku, a ceremonial outfit. Iris appeared even more confused, prompting Kikyo to clarify that it referred to women who served the gods, with duties such as granting wishes and telling fortunes. He deduced that Kikyo was a shrine maiden, though she didn't give off a sacred impression. He stared at her closely, prompting Kikyo to ask if she looked unlike a typical shrine maiden. She admitted that the genuine ones had an air of mystique, while she was more of a subordinate. He agreed and jokingly remarked that someone like that wouldn't collapse from hunger. Kikyo was startled and shouted that it was a harsh comment. She then walked ahead at a quick pace, saying she understood how the world worked, causing both Iris and him to giggle at her reaction. The next morning, inside Yumi's apartment, Kikyo was in tears of joy as she experienced a warm bed and a delicious breakfast. She declared that it was humanity's ultimate pleasure, then asked if they were planning to order any drinks. He replied that they weren't and noted that the doctors had the day off today, so they intended to rest as well. He then asked Kikyo what she planned to do next. Kikyo replied that she needed to look for a job, though she hadn't decided on anything specific yet. He acknowledged her situation and followed up by asking why she had started traveling in the first place. Kikyo explained that the reason she was traveling was because the High Priestess, her parent and guardian, had instructed her to travel west. The priestess had told her that her training was lacking and that she needed to become more independent. Kikyo, in turn, had shouted back her intention to leave, snatched various supplies from the shrine, and declared she wouldn't be returning for a while. Her sudden outburst left them both speechless, simply staring at her. He quietly mentioned to Iris that it sounded like Kikyo had run off. Iris confirmed that she surely did. This made Kikyo even more irritated as she shouted at them, demanding to know why they were reacting that way. She emphasized that she had been completely serious, but he only smiled. In his thoughts, he reflected on the idea of breaking free from one's standing, social status, and expectations. In the modern world, neither he nor Iris had ever considered defying those constraints to live according to their desires. Now he was starting to understand that living freely wasn't necessarily a bad thing. He guessed Kikyo must be a free-spirited person, one who was loved by others, and found himself feeling a bit envious of her way of life. He then told Kikyo that if she was looking for work, he had a recommendation for her. A short while later, they arrived at the place, and Kikyo asked if she would be working there. He explained that it was a tavern managed by the clan, and a friend of his was currently looking for a waitress. If she was interested, he could introduce her. Kikyo considered it for a moment, and he became hesitant, recalling how tough the tavern could be. People often quit quickly due to the demanding environment. He warned her that adventurers frequented the place, and if she felt uncertain, she didn't have to accept the job. But Kikyo responded with enthusiasm, declaring confidently that she would do it and prove she could handle the work. She added that if she could survive the strictness of the High Priestess, no job would be too hard. 2 weeks later, inside the Seekers of Time Guild Tavern, he sat at a table eating and thinking that it had been a while since he last visited. He wondered how Kikyo was doing. His answer came immediately as he saw her trip while holding a tray of food. Chiffon, visibly furious, called out her name after seeing the mess. Chiffon, her tone sharp, asked Kikyo what she was doing, and Kikyo could only stammer an apology. Chiffon began scolding her loudly, and he realized that Kikyo was as chaotic as ever. Hearing laughter beside her, she turned her head. She found Fuka proudly holding a tray of drinks. Fuka gave her a teasing look, which irritated Kikyo even more. She shouted at the dog, asking if it was mocking her. He, watching the scene unfold, wasn't even surprised to see Kikyo fighting with her pet. He recalled the day he had first introduced her to Chiffon. Kikyo had been hired almost instantly, her cuteness winning her points right away. But once she started working, she gave customers the wrong orders, moved far too slowly, tripped over seemingly nothing, and broke multiple plates. Eventually, Chiffon snapped, no longer able to remain forgiving. Smiling through her anger, Chiffon asked Kikyo if she should just fire her. Kikyo had immediately clung to Chiffon's dress, begging for mercy, and explaining that without the job, she'd have no food tomorrow. Chiffon had been about to lose her patience completely, when Fuka gently tapped her paw on Chiffon's dress and let out a soft whine, pleading on Kikyo's behalf. Moved by the dog's effort, Chiffon melted, hugging Fuka tightly and telling Kikyo that she'd be forgiven. Just this once. Kikyo was immensely grateful, and Luru realized then that with Fuka's help, Kikyo had managed to keep her job. Unlike Kikyo, Fuka didn't make mistakes with orders, and unsurprisingly, her salary was higher. He sighed to himself, thinking that, as the one who introduced Kikyo, he should probably take some responsibility. Chiffon overheard and agreed, stating that if things continued at that rate, all the plates in the shop might end up broken. In his defense, he pointed out that Kikyo was becoming popular in her own, unique way. Chiffon admitted defeat and agreed, though reluctantly. She added that she wanted to thank him for something else. But before she could finish, a commotion drew both their attention. A drunk man was grabbing one of the maids by the arm, commenting on her appearance and suggesting they go somewhere after work. The maid pulled away and told him to let go, but the man became more aggressive, gripping her arm tightly and asking who she thought she was. The maid cried out in pain. Luru stood up immediately, noting to Chiffon that someone seemed far too drunk for that time of day. Chiffon replied that while such behavior wasn't uncommon at night, seeing it during the day was unacceptable. He was about to ask what she meant when Kikyo suddenly sprinted past them. She grabbed the man's arm and with surprising strength tripped him, slamming him hard onto the floor. Luru was shocked, staring at the scene in disbelief. Kikyo had pinned the man in an instant. He wondered if it had been some kind of Eastern martial art. Judging from her precise movements, it wasn't brute force. She clearly understood how the human body worked. Kikyo scolded the man, stating firmly that he couldn't do things people didn't like. She then flicked his forehead and ordered him to apologize. The man, realizing everyone in the tavern was watching, immediately offered a sincere apology to the maid. He explained that he had simply been frustrated from work. The maid, a bit shaken, admitted she had gotten carried away too. Kikyo smiled and said she thought things were fine now. Watching the whole event unfold, Luru told Chiffon that he had no idea Kikyo could fight like that, and that she had a strange way of making people feel at ease. Chiffon admitted she had been surprised too. Apart from Kikyo, none of the staff there could handle such situations, so having someone act as a bodyguard was actually helpful. Chiffon then thanked him, saying he'd been a great help. Though he still didn't feel entirely at ease with the praise, he expressed appreciation for her words. Just then, Chiffon smirked, remembering something, and asked if she was right in thinking he had a date with Iris that day. He asked Chiffon what she meant by calling it a date when he and Iris were just heading to the blacksmith together. Chiffon responded playfully, asking if it wasn't fine to call it that, a sibling date after all. He ignored her teasing and asked how she even knew about it. Chiffon smiled knowingly and explained that he was underestimating the information network of a tavern. She then asked if she was right in thinking that he and Iris were meeting outside. He awkwardly admitted that early that morning, Iris had pushed him out of the apartment and told him to have breakfast at the tavern before coming over. For some reason, he'd been abruptly tossed out. Chiffon chuckled, immediately grasping Iris's intent. He told Chiffon that it was already time and thanked her for the food. Chiffon nodded and warned him to take care. As he walked out of the tavern, Chiffon watched him with a smile and quietly wished Iris a fun time. Moments later, he arrived at the park and spotted Iris waiting. He rushed toward her, asking if he had kept her waiting, but he stopped in his tracks, surprised. Iris stood in a sleek black dress, looking elegant and radiant. He hadn't realized just how much she had grown. He figured that perhaps Mii and Yuri, who had visited the night before, had influenced her style. His face flushed, suddenly struck by how beautiful she looked. He was startled when he overheard a nearby boy whisper that Iris was stunning and wondered aloud if she was waiting for her boyfriend. The comment shocked him. From an outsider's perspective, it did look like a date. He quickly shook his head, questioning his own thoughts. Someone like him wasn't supposed to be her boyfriend. He reminded himself that he was currently inhabiting the body of a 14-year-old child. He resumed walking and greeted her again, asking if she had waited long. Iris replied that she had just arrived and called him brother with a gentle smile. The boys who had been watching were surprised to hear they were siblings, making him feel a little awkward under their stares. Then, Iris reached out and took his arm, asking if they were going to the blacksmith and whether they should get moving. He noticed her radiant smile and the warmth of her hand. For a moment, she seemed even more dazzling than usual. He reminded himself not to think too much into it and simply replied that they should go, walking forward together. A short while later, they arrived at the blacksmith shop and found it bustling with customers and workers. The receptionist greeted them warmly, welcoming them to the prosperity of dwarves, and asked what brought them in. He explained that he needed his sword sharpened for an upcoming match. The receptionist asked him to wait a moment, which he accepted, knowing that dwarves had always been synonymous with blacksmithing. During his time as Demon King, he had relied heavily on blacksmiths. The receptionist returned with a receipt. Before leaving, he asked why the shop was named after dwarves even though it was run by a human parent and child. The receptionist explained that the name was chosen out of admiration. Dwarves were once masters of blacksmithing, a clan that had flourished in the past. He hoped to emulate their legacy. The explanation left him puzzled. He asked the receptionist what he meant by saying the dwarves had prospered in the past. Before the receptionist could answer, a man approached and apologized for the interruption, asking about his weapon. The receptionist agreed and followed the man, telling them to return when the weapon was ready. He turned to Iris and asked what she thought the receptionist had meant. Iris speculated that it might be similar to how they referred to themselves as the ancient demonic race. He wondered if that was truly the case. Unlike elves or beasts, dwarves had never been hostile. They had offered their expertise in blacksmithing to both sides. He then questioned why, unlike elves and beastkin who still existed, the dwarves had disappeared. Suddenly, something clicked in his mind. He asked Iris if the absence of dwarves could be one of the reasons why human civilization had declined. Iris replied that there was a strong possibility, though there was no way to confirm it. She then had an idea and reminded him that he had mentioned wanting to visit the library after arriving in the capital. Since they hadn't had the chance earlier, now seemed like a good time. He nodded, thinking there might be new information about the ancient demon tribe. He asked if they should begin a more serious search. They soon arrived at the royal library. Hours passed as they combed through book after book, but found little new information. He eventually noted that he actually knew more about the ancient demon tribe than most. The only new insight he had discovered was that, after a certain point in time, both the dwarves and the goblins had mysteriously vanished. Now, neither race could be found. It was all he had. There were theories, but no confirmed facts. He understood that little was known about what had happened after the war with the human race. Iris commented that, given how much they had researched without finding results, the only remaining option might be to explore ruins. She asked if he truly believed there was nothing left. He responded that a great nation must have left something behind. He couldn't accept that not a single historical record had survived. Then, an idea struck him. In times like this, he reasoned, the best thing to do is to ask a professional. They approached the librarian and asked if there were any more detailed historical records available. The librarian replied that everything viewable was already in the public collection. Still, he pressed, asking if there were any places similar to this that held deeper archives. He mentioned that, as a royal librarian, she might know more. The librarian replied that while she hadn't seen them herself, she had heard of ancient texts stored in the restricted library within the royal palace. Perhaps the national librarian would know more about them. He asked the librarian again, this time in disbelief, to confirm if ancient books were truly stored in the forbidden archives of the royal palace. She replied that yes, such records did exist, but clarified that they were strictly off limits, making it impossible for anyone to read them. Realizing these were government-sealed books, he suspected that they likely contained historical truths too dangerous or controversial to be made public. Still, he knew he couldn't just give up there. He briefly considered whether he should sneak into the castle to take a look, but quickly stopped himself. His father worked for the government, and doing something reckless like that could end up causing unnecessary trouble for him. Turning back to the librarian, he asked if there was any legitimate way to gain access. She paused in thought, then remembered the upcoming tournament. The winner of the tournament would be granted the right to make a request directly to the king. She told him that if he won, that might be his opportunity. He simply responded that he would win. Iris, surprised by his instant confidence, remarked that he was fast with that decision, leaving the librarian speechless as she stared at them. Turning around with a sigh, the librarian silently muttered to herself that they were a dumb couple. He assumed she was probably thinking he didn't stand a chance. Iris then added that if her dear brother was going to win, she supposed she would settle for second place. As they exited the library, Iris pointed out that they hadn't found any concrete information. But he disagreed. In his mind, they had stumbled upon an unexpected lead. He asked who would have thought that the tournament came with a prize like that. Thanking her for spending the day with him, she replied that she hadn't done much, but then hesitantly wondered what he thought of her outfit that day. She recalled the conversation from the previous night. Mi and Yuri had asked her whether Luru really only saw her as a little sister. They had shown her the elegant black dress and encouraged her to wear it for what they jokingly called a date. Iris had objected, pointing out that they were only going to the blacksmith and that showing up dressed like that would seem strange. But Mi had enthusiastically told her not to worry. Luru might not even notice. Yuri agreed, adding that Luru was completely oblivious to those things, reminding her how he hadn't noticed even when she wore a ribbon. Feeling their words were harsh, she had hesitated. But they persuaded her, saying that if she looked more mature, even Luru might finally notice. That hope had stayed with her. Now, standing next to him, she sadly realized that Luru hadn't said a single word about her dress. She felt hurt, though not surprised. She knew that even if Luru had noticed, he probably wouldn't have said anything. Still, she wished he would, just a little. Even a small acknowledgement would have meant something. Her thoughts were interrupted when she spotted a pot of beautiful flowers nearby. He noticed that she was looking at a marguerite flower and asked if she wanted one. Caught off guard, she quickly said no, explaining that she had just been admiring it and didn't know why. But for some reason, she had never been drawn to flowers like that before. Even she was a little surprised. Quietly, he looked at her, then picked up the flower and told her to wait a moment. Walking away, he went to buy it. Panicked, she tried to stop him, flustered by his sudden action. But he ignored her and completed the purchase. When he returned, she quickly pretended to be looking at the other flowers to hide her flustered expression. He handed the flower to her and told her that since she had been looking out for him for the past 7 years, he simply wanted to thank her. And if she didn't mind, she should take it. She stood frozen, overwhelmed by the gesture. She couldn't believe it. Ever since she was a child, she had always been the one receiving, never imagining a future like this would come. Silently, she accepted the flower and thanked him with sincerity. He panicked when he saw her hugging the flower close and warned her that her clothes might get dirty if she held it like that. Tears formed in her eyes, not from sadness, but from quiet happiness. She knew that Luru still saw her as a child, but even so, just being by his side like this was enough for her. She apologized for being dramatic and explained that she was just genuinely happy. She promised that she would take good care of the flower and hoped that these peaceful days would never come to an end. He had expected many people in the streets. It was, after all, the day of the tournament in the royal capital, the greatest form of entertainment in the region. Iris, clearly excited, pointed out that it was only the opening ceremony, and yet the crowd was already buzzing. He responded that it was a massive event, drawing participants even from overseas, so it made sense that so many had gathered to witness it. Still, his attention was elsewhere. Iris commented that if the Demon Nation had hosted a tournament like this in the past, she would have loved to see it. But his focus was on how nearly everyone around them was too busy staring at her. He was then caught off guard when a white carriage passed by. The murmuring of the crowd followed, some wondering aloud if it belonged to a noble. One man called out to his friend, asking if that wasn't the saint's carriage. Both he and Iris were stunned. Whispers quickly spread among the crowd, speculating whether the holy nation of Arca had sent someone, and whether this year's honored guest was from the sacred theocracy. Excitement rippled as people spoke of the Holy Emperor's possible arrival and the opportunity to see the saintess in person. He and Iris were left speechless. Breaking the silence, Iris asked if the title Saint brought back memories. He admitted that it did, but clarified that the saint, despite her abnormality, had still been human. There was no way she could have lived until now. It had to be someone new. However, Iris didn't seem reassured. She stopped walking, a sudden thought surfacing in her mind. She asked whether it was possible that the saint had been reborn too, just like him. The suggestion surprised him. After a pause, he admitted that it was indeed possible. If he could be reincarnated, there was no reason the saintess couldn't be. The thought unsettled him. If the woman before them was truly the same saint from their past, then Iris was in far more danger than he was. He warned her that, should it turn out to be her, she should run the moment she realized it. He would either hold the saintess back or take her down. Iris was shaken. The overwhelming aura radiating from him in that moment reminded her that, though he kept his power hidden most of the time, he had never truly changed. She felt the same force she once knew, a presence so immense and commanding that it nearly brought her to her knees. The very embodiment of a king who ruled through magic. He gently patted her head and reassured her. If it was just one saint, he said, he could handle it, so she didn't need to worry. She looked up and saw his warm smile and, stammering, agreed with him. A moment later, they arrived at the venue for the opening ceremony. Iris observed that a few attendees looked like participants, though not many seemed to pose a real challenge. She accidentally said it aloud, drawing the ire of nearby contestants. He reminded her that Gran had already warned them. Fighting outside the tournament grounds would result in disqualification. With a teasing tone, he asked why she was provoking others. Embarrassed, Iris quickly covered her mouth and apologized. She explained that she hadn't realized she was speaking her thoughts and blushed in embarrassment. He smiled to himself, recognizing that Iris was more fired up than usual. At her core, she was still a battle-hardened demon. At this rate, he figured Iris might be his toughest opponent in the entire tournament. Once everyone was seated, the host thanked the audience for their patience and announced the opening of the grandest event in the kingdom. The crowd erupted in excitement. The host then informed everyone that the king would now deliver the opening address and asked for silence. The king introduced himself as Griffith Land Leonard, monarch of the Kingdom of Leonard. He began by remarking that it was a perfect, cloudless day for such an occasion. Luru quietly commented that Griffith had a reputation as a wise king, which Iris agreed with. She asked if it was true that Griffith would grant a wish to the tournament winner. Luru confirmed it and said that was all the more reason to give their best effort. Griffith continued, explaining that the tournament would last for about a week, made possible through the efforts of many. He expressed special thanks to the elder of the ancient clan, Elder Latos, for setting up the barrier. Latos stepped forward and thanked Griffith respectfully before introducing himself as an elder of the ancient clan. He told the crowd that taking part in setting up the venue would be a lifelong memory for him. Luru listened carefully, wondering if Latos knew Yumi's. He guessed that Latos had lived much longer than he appeared. Latos clarified that their clan had long been forbidden from directly aiding any nation. The absolute barrier they had created would be dismantled immediately after the tournament, and they would not be providing any further magical knowledge to the Leonard Kingdom. He assured the public that their role was only to prepare the stage. It was the warriors gathered there who would bring the true excitement. He encouraged everyone to enjoy the next week together before stepping down from the stage. As Latos exited, the audience applauded. But just before he disappeared from sight, Luru noticed him glancing directly in his direction. Confused, he wondered aloud if the elder had looked at him specifically. Iris glanced toward Latos but said she hadn't noticed anything unusual. Luru wondered if he had imagined it. The host returned to announce that it was time to welcome the honored guest of the year. Representing the holy nation of Arca, the saintess was about to make her entrance. He turned to the stage, only to be surprised by who the saintess was. The saintess then stepped forward gracefully and introduced herself as Charlotte Malm of the Sacred Theocracy, acknowledging that some in the audience might be seeing her for the first time. She explained that she had come as a representative of the holy nation of Arca, invited personally by King Griffith. He whispered to Iris that Charlotte looked remarkably similar to the saintess from their past. Iris nodded, agreeing. She noted that although she had only seen portraits of the past saint, the resemblance was undeniable, but there was something different. He agreed with her observation, noting that while Charlotte's hair color and aura were almost identical, her face wasn't quite the same. More importantly, if Charlotte truly was the church's saintess, it didn't make sense that he could barely sense any holy energy from her. Iris confirmed she couldn't feel a trace of it either, making him briefly consider whether Charlotte was not someone they needed to worry about after all. But just then, Charlotte clasped her hands together and released a bright, radiant blue light, exactly like before. The sudden surge of holy energy startled both him and Iris. Reacting instantly, he cast a protective shield around her. Iris thanked him, saying she felt much lighter now. Turning back toward Charlotte, he recognized the magic she had just used. It was the same divine magic the previous saintess had wielded. He was shocked when Charlotte then manifested holy wings, spreading holy energy outward across the entire venue. After a few moments, she withdrew the energy, smiled warmly, and wished blessings upon everyone. She bowed respectfully to the host, who in turn thanked her for the divine gift. He watched closely, wondering if what she had cast was truly a blessing. Looking around, he noticed that the people seemed invigorated, refreshed, as if their very energy had been lifted. Whispering to Iris, he asked if she was all right. She whispered back that she was fine, thanks to him. As the host moved on to introduce guests from the neighboring nation, his mind remained occupied with thoughts of the holy nation of Arca, their mysterious saintess, and the implications for the tournament. Something in him whispered that things were about to get complicated. Hours later, the opening ceremony concluded. Nothing had followed Charlotte's dramatic appearance. As they made their way out, Iris asked him how he felt about everything and whether Charlotte could truly be the same saint. He replied no, explaining that the saintess from the church's past, the one who had fought beside the hero, was a completely different person. He also doubted that Charlotte was her reincarnation. Curious, Iris asked why he seemed so certain. She reminded him that Charlotte had clearly wielded holy energy and even used a technique resembling divine magic. Though she wasn't sure what the wings were exactly, that kind of magic was an advanced technique created by humans long ago, something that modern humans shouldn't be able to perform. He acknowledged her point, but reminded her that she had never actually faced the previous saintess in battle. The power that woman had once wielded was overwhelming. With a single spell, she had turned entire groups of demons to ash. While some of his judgment was instinctual, he argued that the fact that Iris had stood through Charlotte's spell without collapsing was proof enough. Charlotte was not the same. Iris agreed, noting that while she had felt a bit breathless during the holy surge, it wasn't nearly powerful enough to make her feel like she was on the verge of being erased. Relieved, she admitted that while Charlotte might have some connection to the past, she was definitely not that saint. He nodded. Even so, he thought Iris had a point. There was some kind of connection. The resemblance was too strong, and the use of divine magic too peculiar. Either way, the fact that Charlotte could wield holy energy made her dangerous. He told Iris he would teach her some countermeasures, even if just temporary fixes. Iris thanked him, saying she understood. The next day, the first round of tournament qualifiers began. He found himself facing a beginner, a young boy brimming with determination. He felt guilty about crushing someone's dreams so early, but still, he stepped forward and delivered a precise strike with the handle of his sword to the boy's stomach. The boy collapsed instantly. He sheathed his weapon, telling himself that this was simply the nature of the tournament. He apologized quietly to the boy, telling him he would have to give up. Looking down, he noticed the participant badge hanging from the boy's clothes. Including his own, that made 2. For the first round, he knew they were required to collect 5 participant badges and hold on to them until sunset. As he reached to retrieve the badge, he suddenly felt a hostile presence. Instinctively, he jumped back just as a wave of flame scorched the pavement where he had been standing. It was a close call. He looked to the side, startled, and commented sharply that the participant had burned the pavement, something he thought wasn't allowed within the city. The young woman was terrified by his reaction and immediately turned to flee, running away in fear. He looked back at the collapsed boy and figured it must be fine. After all, the organizers hadn't stepped in to stop him. He picked up the boy's badge, reflecting that the girl had tried to ambush him while he was distracted collecting it. She had made her move based on her assessment of his strength. He concluded that she had potential, and decided to let her go this time. Just then, one of the tournament staff shouted to him, remarking that he was pretty bold for a beginner. Most new participants were too scared to face even intermediate-level opponents. He glanced at the boy nearby, who was now panicking and trying to escape, mistakenly thinking they were talking about him. Luru smiled to himself. He could chase the boy down, but something about picking on the weak didn't sit right with him. Instead, he wondered who he should target next. Meanwhile, on another street, tournament staff watched as a group of kids sprinted at full speed while someone followed them calmly from behind. They began to panic when they realized it was Iris. One of them shouted that if they didn't hurry, she'd catch up. The others, already out of breath, could barely move. They turned back and saw Iris's glowing red eyes bearing down on them. One of the girls pointed her wand and cast a spell, sending a wave of flowing water that morphed into a block of ice. Her 2 companions joined in with fire and wind spells. Together, they launched their combined attack toward Iris and assumed that would be enough. But their moment of confidence vanished when Iris walked straight through the barrage without a scratch, her expression calm and unreadable. They wondered in horror if she had just cast defensive magic without a chant. Iris asked them if that was all they had. Her quiet words sent chills through them, and the terrified trio cried out in fear. Then she attacked, and their screams echoed down the alley. Elsewhere, Fuka calmly strolled through the tournament grounds with a bag full of badges. Staff members watched, curious. They noted that Fuka was within the arena's barrier and speculated that she must be someone's familiar. What surprised them was that none of the participants were trying to take the badges from her. Fuka padded over to a barrel and knocked on it. A laugh came from within, and Kikyo popped out, cheering that Fuka had done it. She began counting the badges and, satisfied with the haul, praised her companion. She promised Fuka that she'd upgrade its meals by 1 tier, which made the dog visibly happy. The staff quickly realized that Kikyo had been hiding while letting her dog gather badges. One of them commented that it was a valid strategy. After all, using an animal in combat usually left the caster exposed as a target. One man called out to Kikyo, telling her to keep it up and admitting that he didn't hate her style. Kikyo thanked him and cheerfully announced that she and Fuka were working hard to aim for 5th place. She waved as she walked off. The staff exchanged looks, wondering why she was aiming for 5th instead of 1st. Until one remembered the prize for 5th place. A magical item called the Tablecloth of Holy Communion, which could produce 3 meals a day for 2 people. They murmured that the item was incredibly valuable, something only 2 or 3 existed in the entire kingdom. They speculated that Kikyo must be really struggling for food, even though they had seen her eating at the tavern. Kikyo turned to Fuka and confirmed whether it understood that if they could secure 5th place, they'd finally be able to eat until full every day. She excitedly declared that they had nailed the preliminaries and should hide until the round ended. Fuka happily agreed. Hours later, the first round concluded, and participants began submitting their badge totals. Luru handed his in, and the examiner commented that he had gathered quite a lot. He laughed awkwardly, explaining that one of the advanced adventurers he fought had been carrying several. The examiner nodded and informed him that they would collect the badges, but he should keep one on him for the remainder of the tournament. He acknowledged the rule and set one badge aside for himself. Just then, someone praised him for a job well done. Turning around, he saw Rusty with the others. He asked if they had all made it through the first round, and they proudly confirmed it. Rusty explained that they had each entered with their own parties, and 3 of them had managed to secure 5 badges. Gaia chimed in, proudly calling it a strategic victory. Gaia then nervously asked about Iris and Kikyo, only to be interrupted by the sound of jingling coins. They turned to see both Iris and Kikyo submitting full bags of badges at the counter. Luru pointed out that it looked like both had made it through safely. Rusty, me, and Yuri were speechless, though they had expected as much. Gaia, however, couldn't believe the sheer number of badges they had collected. Rusty said he was glad everyone had made it through and suggested they grab a meal at the tavern. Kikyo immediately agreed and excitedly insisted they go right away, appearing at Luru's side in a blur the moment food was mentioned. Her sudden arrival startled him. Iris smiled sweetly and praised Luru for doing well, saying they should replenish their energy too. He nodded in agreement and replied that he was looking forward to round 2 the next day. Meanwhile, inside Leonard's castle, Charlotte strode briskly down the corridor, her expression composed but resolute. In her thoughts, she knew. Now was the time to make their move. She hurried after Latos. She politely asked him to wait. Latos, surprised, stopped in his tracks and turned to her, asking what business a young woman like her had with an old man like him. He addressed her respectfully as Holy Maiden. She apologized for stopping him and explained that she wished to discuss their nation's defenses. However, Latos responded by reiterating what he had said during the opening ceremony, that the ancient elves had no intention of sharing their technology with any nation. He reminded her that the martial tournament was an exceptional case. She persisted, pointing out that looking back over the past few centuries, there had never been a precedent of the ancient races sharing their technology with outsiders. She asked why they were breaking that principle now, just for the sake of a tournament. Latos considered her words and then asked if she followed the teachings of the holy god faith. When she nodded, he explained that they too held sacred teachings, and that their cooperation in this case had been guided by those beliefs. He asked if she might understand such reasoning. Confused, she asked if the ancient races had their own set of teachings. Latos gave her a gentle smile and apologized, explaining that their faith was a closely guarded secret. He added that, as a religious figure herself, he was sure she could appreciate that there were things they could not disclose to outsiders. She fidgeted slightly, then respectfully replied that she understood and apologized for taking his time. She noted that the tournament was far from over and asked if he would at least join them to watch the remaining matches. Latos chuckled and said it was more likely he would be the one requesting such a favor. She smiled sweetly, pleased by his answer, and told him she looked forward to it. Latos returned the sentiment and shook her hand, wishing her well. The next day, during the second round of the tournament preliminaries at the third venue, a match had just concluded, and a boy named Silvio emerged victorious. Luru observed that the second round followed a one-on-one tournament format. Kikyo, excited as ever, explained that matches were happening simultaneously across multiple venues. She added that out of more than 1,000 initial participants, only about 200 had advanced to the second round, and from there, only the top 24 would qualify for the main tournament. He acknowledged that it would have taken forever to host the tournament in just one location. Iris chimed in, noting that unlike the chaotic first round where anything went, the second round was a true test of individual skill. She added that she was eager to see how everyone would perform. He agreed, pointing out that their own matches were scheduled later, so they could watch the others for now. The host then announced the next match, introducing me as a rising star making waves in the tournament. Her opponent was Greyfus, a massive warrior known as the battle axe that smashes through everything. The audience gasped, surprised that a small girl like me was about to face such a giant. Some murmured that it might be better for her to forfeit. Iris overheard the comments and remarked that me was probably outmatched, though her confident smile betrayed her true expectations. The host declared the match had begun. Greyfus charged immediately, swinging his massive axe toward me. But in a flash, she vanished. Greyfus looked around, stunned, unable to locate her, unaware that me was already behind him. Drawing her sword, Thunder, she delivered a swift strike that electrocuted and slashed him simultaneously. Greyfus collapsed in an instant, and me hadn't even broken a sweat. The host stammered as he announced her overwhelming victory. Me had not only overcome the size difference, but had also done so with ease. Luru commented that me had improved considerably since leaving their village. Iris, with clear pride, replied that it seemed me hadn't neglected her training at all. She then noted that Yuri's match was next. The audience suddenly erupted into cheers, especially the female spectators, swooning over Ortez. Meanwhile, the male spectators voiced their annoyance, yelling that looks didn't win battles and demanding that Ortez lose. Iris remarked that Ortez was quite skilled. Luru nodded in agreement, noting that Ortez seemed like a pure swordsman, which gave him an edge over Yuri, a rear support mage. Kikyo, slightly worried, asked if Yuri would be alright. Iris confidently assured her that Yuri would be just fine. The host introduced the next match. Ortez, a popular contestant admired for both beauty and skill, versus Yuri, another rising star recognized not just for her talent, but also for her elegance. As the match began, Ortez greeted Yuri with arrogant charm. He commented that it might be too early to say, but he would hate to harm someone so beautiful and asked if she would consider surrendering. Yuri responded politely, saying she appreciated the offer but respectfully declined. She added that she wasn't so weak as to be hurt by someone like him. Ortez, offended, asked if she was underestimating him based on his appearance. He then drew his sword and lunged at her, shouting that he would show her his true strength. But before he could reach her, Yuri calmly summoned her Gladius Spiritus, a powerful sword spirit. An armored knight appeared between them, its sudden presence halting Ortez in his tracks. He stumbled backward in fear, shouting and demanding to know what that thing was. She teasingly asked him back if he was surprised and explained that it was a spirit she had summoned through magic. He couldn't believe it. He knew that only high-level mages could summon spirits, and he was certain she wasn't just a high-level mage, because he had never seen a spirit like that before. He then wondered if what Yuri had said earlier was a chant. Ortez couldn't tell whether it was another language or an ancient one. Ortez also couldn't believe that Yuri could perform such advanced magic with such short words. Everyone was amazed, asking if it was ancient magic. Luru told Iris that she had trained Yuri well, but Iris told him to save his compliments until after the results were declared. Ortez then told Yuri that it seemed he had been the one underestimating her and apologized, but added that he couldn't afford to lose, and that he wouldn't lose. He then dashed past the knight and swung his sword down in Yuri's direction, but the knight appeared between them in time and blocked Ortez's sword. Ortez realized that it was still impossible to target Yuri directly. Luru told Iris that Ortez wasn't making bad decisions, but he was too slow. Ortez then attempted to thrust his sword at the knight, but before he could, the knight disappeared from in front of him and reappeared behind him. He immediately turned around when he sensed the presence, but unfortunately, it was too late. The knight struck once, and Ortez collapsed. The host then announced that the winner was Yuri. Iris told him it felt a little close for comfort, but she supposed it was a passing grade. He wondered aloud what would have happened if it hadn't been a passing grade. She then told him that only Rusty remained and asked if he thought Rusty would be okay. He proudly replied that Rusty was his first disciple ever, which meant Rusty wouldn't lose so easily. This surprised Iris. She teasingly said that it meant Rusty was the Demon King's one and only beloved disciple. And when she thought about it, she couldn't imagine a future where Rusty lost. The host then called the currently talked about mid-level adventurer Rusty onto the stage. But Rusty's expression was telling, something else entirely, prompting Iris to notice that Rusty seemed nervous. He agreed and told her that me and Yuri were naturally confident, but Rusty had a humble side to him. Suddenly, the ladies cheered for Rusty and shouted for him to do his best. He noticed that somehow, the age group of Rusty's supporters seemed a bit older. Iris was then surprised when she saw the opponent's armor and asked if it was the armor of a kingdom knight. She was amazed that even knights were participating, not just adventurers. He responded that it wasn't surprising. After all, even shrine maidens were participating. He then looked to his side to check on Kikyo, who had been silent for a while, and was shocked to see she had disappeared. He then spotted her and Fuka near the fence corner, cheering for Rusty. He asked when they had gotten over there. The host then told Rusty and the knight to be prepared and started the match. The knight noticed Rusty's stance and asked if he was perhaps the beloved disciple of Patrick. He said he had heard Patrick had a disciple participating in the tournament. Rusty replied that he didn't know if he was the beloved disciple, since there was another disciple participating as well, and that one was much stronger than him. The knight was surprised to hear this and recalled that Patrick had never said he had only one disciple. The knight then apologized and explained that his dream was to cross swords with Patrick himself. Patrick had told him that if he could defeat his beloved disciple, he would accept a duel. This surprised Rusty, as it was the first time he had heard of it. The knight then said that thanks to that promise, his path was clear. He had to defeat both disciples, and for the sake of his dream, he would break through Rusty and the other as well. Luru asked aloud what kind of promise his father had made, because it was the first time he'd heard of it too. Iris told him that Patrick probably said it in a moment of desperation, and reminded him that Patrick tended to get pressured by passionate people like the knight. He then remembered his father panicking while the knight had pleaded, and agreed that Patrick probably couldn't refuse. He asked if that meant he would have to fight the knight later as well, and Iris replied that if Rusty won, he wouldn't have to worry about it. Realizing this, he stood up, thanks to Iris's encouragement, and decided to cheer for Rusty too. Kikyo then asked him if he would join them and gave him a fan, crafted from her hometown. He took the fan and quietly began cheering for Rusty as well. Rusty thought that if the man was a knight of the kingdom, he must have learned tactics from Patrick, and so decided to make the first strike. He released his energy and swung his sword at the knight. The knight blocked it and praised his speed. The knight then forcefully pushed Rusty's sword away, which pushed him back as well, though he managed to stay on his feet. Luru was amazed watching them. Rusty grew excited seeing that the knight was still not serious. Rusty then asked the knight if he was right in assuming he wasn't serious yet either. The knight asked Rusty back if they should end the warm-up and get serious. They both then released their auras and energy. Kikyo told Luru that Rusty was starting to channel his mana, which was an essential skill for warriors. But both of them were quite impressive. He agreed with her and said that there weren't many mid-level adventurers at that level. He explained that the technique of channeling mana internally and flowing it through the body was taught by his father and grandfather, while he himself had taught the external body-enhancing magic. He added that normally, people could only use one or the other, but Rusty could maintain both. Kikyo asked him if Rusty was layering multiple enhancements with magic and said it was quite skillful of him. He proudly told Kikyo that they had all trained Rusty hard, but Rusty had always admired adventurers and had worked diligently, pushing himself through rigorous training to get that far. He then shouted for Rusty to win the fight. Rusty and the knight's swords then collided. Rusty jumped away, realizing that his opponent was indeed a knight serving the kingdom,